Hello and welcome to Season 4 of the Fresh Finds Podcast, the show about discovering new music with good people. I'm Ryan, and joining me for the first episode of the new year is Adam from the New York alt-rock band Allapartus. How are you doing, man?
I am doing excellent. So blessed to be here. So excited to chat with you today.
Good to hear, man. I think it's going to be a good one. Going to be a good start to 2024. At least I sure hope so. Do you want to take a minute to introduce yourself, talk about the kind of music that you make, the band, any of that kind of stuff?
Absolutely. Sounds great. But yeah, my name is Adam. I'm from New York. I was born and raised in the Hudson Valley and then moved into Bed-Stuy in Brooklyn and I've been here the last 7 years. But yeah, I have this band Allapartus that I started way back during college with a couple friends, and over the years it kind of evolved through a couple different, eras, a couple different Taylor Swift eras, as Taylor would say. And yeah, in the more recent years, it's taken on this kind of this new form where I'm the primary producer and songwriter, and then I have a lot of friends who are collaborators who kind of come in and bring different flavors to it. But yeah, it's Allapartus or Allapartus. There's no right way to pronounce it. Yeah, all pronunciations are welcome here.
Ain't that the great thing about made up words?
But yeah, I mean, I call it alt rock, alternative rock. People call it pop punk. People call it post hardcore. People call it post pop. I mean, there's a million genre names, but I feel like the best way to keep it simple is it's just alt rock music.
Well, and that's the thing, is you kind of juggle around with the sounds. You've got some stuff that's a lot more spacey and kind of like ambient sounding, and you've got some stuff that's a bit more poppy. You've got some stuff that's a bit on the heavier side. So I mean, it's hard when you make such a wide breadth of different sounds to really bring it down to just one label. So I think alt rock is a great way to describe it.
Yeah, and when I was kind of writing like what's the pitch of Allapartus, when I was working on my Spotify bio, what I liked was the idea of like atmosphere and catharsis is what it is. I love beautiful atmosphere, but when it comes to especially playing live shows, I don't want to be chill during live shows. I'm more of a lunatic during live shows, but I think that there's a good balance of both. And that also just speaks to where I come from, where, growing up I loved like beautiful atmospheric pop music, but then going into high school and then into college, I spent a lot of time in the hardcore scene. And so I saw, a lot of the benefits and the beauty of like, pop production, but also a lot of the, kind of untethered, unhinged catharsis of more extreme music. And I related very deeply to it. So bringing that into my music is super important. But yeah, Allapartus, we're just like a New York rock band. And my tagline that I use for people is, it's rock music meant to be played on the International Space Station.
I like that. So looking at Spotify, it looks like the earliest release that you have goes back to 2019. Is 2019 when this started, or did it start earlier and that's just the earliest release on Spotify?
So it's the earliest release on Spotify. We started, the first like incarnation of Allapartus traces back to like 2012.
Oh, right.
Back when I was like a kid, and I met a couple friends in school, and we started a band. We ended up putting out one little EP with, the original members that we put out on Bandcamp that you can still find if you search Allapartus. It'll pop right up. It was very representative of the time, and it definitely leaned much more towards like post-hardcore kind of punk music. And I'm still proud as hell of that EP. I still to this day, I think something I'm blessed with is, unlike most of my friends who are writers, you look at something you made 2 years ago and people kind of cringe and go, oh God, that was so bad. But I kind of have the inverse of that, where I look at stuff that I wrote back in like 2014 and I'm like, damn, I was so good. I was a genius back then.
I feel like it's one of those things where like you have to give yourself some distance to truly appreciate what you've come up with, because when you're in the process of writing and recording and you're on the 17th mix revision, you get to the point where you're just like, do I just suck? Does everything I do, is it terrible? And then you listen to it like, a year or two later after you haven't really listened to it again, and you're like, yeah, that was good. Okay, I stand by that.
Yeah. No, I think I'm lucky in that I've been doing it long enough that I give myself a lot of grace now. But yeah, we started way back then and kind of had like a messy form. And then we put out a release in 2014. And then, in the second half of college, like, we'd play a show every once in a while. We'd, kind of get together and write something. There was a demo here, a demo there. But then it kind of like, just kind of fizzled out a bit. And then after college, I met up with my drummer and we started writing again and started like messing around with some stuff. And those first two songs that we put out were those 2019 releases. Treehouse and Avow,
Okay.
which are two songs that I still think fucking rock. After that, it was like, oh my God. Right after that, I had gotten laid off from a job, which sucked, and I was on the job hunt. And then right after that was COVID. And so it's like we weren't writing, we weren't hanging out together. So after that process, it kind of fizzled out a little bit. My friend Kurt, who was my drummer, he moved away. And then it took about 2 years for me to get up the guts to start writing again. And I started writing, and then I started producing, and then I started getting into mixing and mastering. And then the incarnation of that was 10 years and No Conviction, which are the next two releases where I totally wrote and recorded them, just in my bedroom during COVID. And even though I was working full time, I was still doing all this other work and stuff. I was still so desperate to put out music, and I realized that it wasn't going to go away. I kind of had to make something. It was just at, a snail's pace. And then a little while after that, made the music, thought it was great. After a few years working, corporate jobs, I just kind of came to a realization that I needed to spend more time invested in the art. I didn't think that I'd always be able to go back to a corporate job, but I wouldn't ever be able to go back to my 20s being a musician in New York City. And so it was kind of like a no-brainer to decide to take time away from, I gave all my early 20s to corporations. I decided to take the latter half of it for myself. And so took some time away, met a good friend who ended up being my producer, Colin. And then we ended up putting out the next two singles, which is It's Not That Bad and Spinning in the Driveway, as well as the next singles that will be coming out. So yeah, it's kind of gone through a couple different incarnations, but there's been, a steady through line of me songwriting. And then, the people who were in the original band, the bassist is my best friend, who's a film director who's unbelievable, named Tom Van Scoik. The drummer is my friend Kurt Liniger, and he, is like a photographer who lives out in Connecticut. They're all still good friends of mine who I still collaborate with and talk with all the time. So Allapartus has become a little bit bigger than just me, and it's become more of a network of people, and I'm just the person at the front kind of pushing stuff out into the world. But yeah, that's kind of like the brief elevator pitch of the history of Allapartus.
Gotcha. I like it. So are you still how much collaboration do you have when it comes to songwriting? Are you still the primary songwriter? Do the people who play live, do they often help with arrangement and coming up with parts? Or is it typically you'll cook something up kind of in the studio, so to speak, and then everybody else gets it together for the live show?
Yeah, so what it is now is that it's when we do live shows, it's me and it's my drummer Danny.
Okay.
With the processes, yeah, usually it's me demoing out and producing the initial kind of the initial version of the song in my house, just here in my little studio, and then I'll bring it to my producer. We'll work it out. I will always do some really bad drums because I can play guitar, I can play bass, I can sing, I can produce, I can play piano, I can do lots of random instruments, and I can play drums. Just I can't play them well. And so I write the drums, and then Danny writes the good drums. Is the way I would put it. So definitely the bigger collaboration is that me and Danny, when we started with It's Not That Bad, wrote the initial drums for it. It's like 2 or 3 drum loops, and then brought him in the studio and was like, Danny, just do your thing, do whatever you think feels good. And in one take, he just wrote the most killer drums ever, and it was effortless. So from then on with Danny, usually is I'll come out with an initial drum, part, an initial demo of the song, and then Danny's the one who will really send it home and give it a groove and give it kind of a pocket. But yeah, as far as the songs, the content, the melody and stuff, that's all stuff that's me. And then Colin, my producer, who was a choir guy back in high school when he was younger, he'll take the harmonies and the melodies and stuff that I make, and he'll actually add technicality to it, and kind of tell me, Adam, this harmony that you have is cool, but if you did a 9 instead of a 7 on this chord, it'll sound even better. And so Danny adds the percussive elements that I'm weak in, and then Colin definitely adds, besides the production, which is he's a master of, also definitely a little bit more music technicality, which is also something I'm lacking in because I was just a garage band musician.
Yeah, right on. There's definitely something huge about having, even if it's small little bits, having collaboration on different things. But when you're recording drums, it sounds like you actually go into a studio for that. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah, we do the initial. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Is this a pretty even split of kind of bedroom production with the guitars and things, and then doing more of the vocals and the drums in the studio, or is it mostly just demos that you're doing at home at this point?
It's mostly demos. As far as time, it's all the time is spent writing. I'm definitely more of the Leonard Cohen variety of some songs I'll write in 5 minutes and they're done, and some songs I'll spend 3 or 4 years on. So it's all over the place. But yeah, no, the initial demo is there, and then what I do is I just build out the framework so we don't have to figure out what the song is when we're in the studio, but we definitely take the song and then elevate it. So yeah, as far as the recording, I do all the ideas at home, but then when I go to Colin's studio, which is this studio called Sword and Dagger in Bushwick, which is a 20-minute walk from my house. Yeah, I just walk over, and then we do the drums there, we do guitars, we'll actually do 2 bands amps rather than just all the plugins and stuff. And then we'll do vocals with, are not the mics that I bought for $100 back in, 2016.
Yeah, some actual like nice microphones as opposed to like an AT 2020 or something like that. So you put out 2 singles last year, which was "It's Not That Bad" and "Spinning in the Driveway." Are those your first 2 that were collaborative with your current drummer?
Yeah, both.
Is that correct?
Yeah, both of those were with Danny, and kind of took some elements, and he'll take styles from the initial demo and then just add his own variety. And I'll say that both those songs were great, and he added a lot of texture to it and a lot more drive to it. Because my drums, when I demo them out, they just sound dead. Danny just is an electric shock to the system. He's just a force of nature. But especially with the next single that we're putting out, his drums are just like outrageous. It's like the initial demo just doesn't even compare. He just like adds a totally new formation. But yeah, to answer your question, yes, Danny was those are the first 2 songs I collaborated with him on.
Right on. Yeah, this new track, Coalesce, is that correct?
Yep.
I've been listening to that the last couple days, and man, I absolutely love the arrangement of this one, man. The way that it starts out nice and soft and then just really gets into it there. It's such a fun one. Is there anything that you specifically want to say about the background of that track and anything that went into recording it?
So it's a song that, again, going back to that idea of like, there's some songs that take no time at all, and there's some songs that take like years. This song took years. I started this initially, like, me and Kurt came up with ideas for this back in like 2018 and started like messing around with it. And then it just lay dormant. And then like, after a couple years, I brought it back and I was just like, this song is amazing. And I started like messing around with it, messing with the mix, messing with some aspects of the arrangement. And then, yeah, it was just like, I want to put this out. And then especially once there's kind of the drive of what's the sonic kind of direction that I want to go with Allapartus. But then once I started playing live shows with Danny, it was the idea of like, what is the energy that I want to communicate when we play live shows? And when we started playing Coalesce, it felt so much like the direction I wanted to go into. Because like you said, there's these really beautiful moments that, especially like live, just like fill up the room. It feels like extremely vibey, very atmospheric, very ethereal. I like that the verses feel very ethereal, but then the choruses and the endings are just like crushing. It's just so loud and so heavy, and that's stuff that I love. I love integrating both of those kind of aspects of the spectrum. I was listening earlier today to your episode with Cacophony Kid, which is amazing.
Oh, hell
it's a great episode. I listened to like the first 3 quarters of it, and he brought up a lot of references of stuff that I love that are very similar. Woodkid is one of them. Woodkid has stuff that is like really beautiful and orchestral and huge and cinematic, but also parts that are so industrial and hard and tactile. And another example is Angels and Airwaves, which is kind of like one of my secret like greatest influences. I feel like a nerd liking Angels and Airwaves to some of my friends who are like, that stuff is soft. But I love it. I think it's incredible. It's some of the most influential music to me, and the balance again between these like soaring guitars and really, really, really heavy beats underneath. So yeah, with Coalesce, it was very much just about kind of taking that concept of Allapartus, of atmosphere and kind of like heavier catharsis, and elevating that to a more extreme level. And it's also just like a song that I remember the first day that I went in to record vocals. It's one of those songs that I feel like for probably most vocalists, vocals are hard and you kind of get in your own head, but it's a song that I love to sing. And when I rewrote some of the lyrics this time around and just going through what it's about and kind of what are the feelings and what are the emotions and thoughts that went into it, feels so earnest and so authentic. I don't feel like there's anything that's put on in this song. It feels so deeply a part of me that, yeah, whenever I play it, it feels like the best thing in the world. It feels like the most like the truest version of myself when I play it. I feel like the best version of myself. So yeah, Coalesce.
No, I totally understand that, because there are definitely certain songs that I've written that like not necessarily about one of my experiences. So I'm just kind of like, I wrote about this thing, but it's not something super close to me, and it's like it can be hard to get in the zone to sing those sorts of things. And then something that's like so deeply personal, it can be so cathartic when you're singing those things, just like you were talking about the catharsis of the heavy music. And I think that that's such an awesome quality, and you really are somebody who has the same sort of thoughts as I do as far as like what makes a good song, which is the dynamics and the difference between the heavier parts and the the soft parts.
Totally.
I cannot get enough of like a good dynamic arrangement. You know, like that's one of my favorite things in music, and I think that this new song is exemplary of that. It's great.
I don't want to put you on a spot. What do you think is when you think of some of your favorite bands, what do you think is a band that does that really well? I can think of like a couple, but I'm curious to know, like, what are some bands that you feel like as far as dynamic range that they just kill it with?
It's funny, the one that I always think of, because it was such a big part of my musical vocabulary, like growing up, is Led Zeppelin.
Oh yeah.
Because I forget exactly what it was, if it was a book or an article or something, but there was an interview with Jimmy Page where he talked about light and shade and the idea of having both and having this, sort of almost like a battle is kind of how he described it. And when I read that when I was, like a teenager, that had such an impact on me and the way that I think about music that it's insane.
I think I don't know if you ever saw like It Might Get Loud with Jimmy Page and The Edge.
Oh yeah.
I think about that movie all the time. I can watch that movie any day of the week. I could watch it, finish it, and then just watch it again because it's so much fun to watch.
It's so good.
And again, on the other lists of like bands that is like not cool to like, but that I love The Edge, and I love you too. I feel like The Edge is like one of the coolest guitarists ever. I catch so much shit about that. All my friends roast me for being a U2 fan, but watching that movie though, watching Jimmy Page talk about the music and kind of his philosophy of music. I mean, also the fact that he comes from a production background. If I'm not mistaken, it's like the first album and probably some of the others. I'm not a huge Zeppelin fan, but I have a very surface level love of it. He has a lot. It's obvious that he has a rich understanding of production, and you can feel that kind of, again, spectrum that's spread across the song from stuff that goes from super subtle to the super, super not subtle. But no, man, Jimmy Page is cool.
For a long time, he was a studio musician, so he was just a studio rat for a long time, and so definitely like got to understand like those elements of production that a lot of people, even when they have spent a bit of time in the studio, still kind of chase after.
Yeah.
And some people just they spend that time, and that's just. I feel like I have been talking about this a ton on recent episodes, but just like the arrangement is one of the biggest parts of songwriting that I feel like gets overlooked, especially when it comes to like modern kind of pop punk music. It's very much like the same sort of like style of guitar part the entire time, and then people wonder why they don't have these really dynamic songs, and it's like, well, you didn't really change anything throughout the entire thing. You played a different riff, but it was still the same intensity.
I'll tell you, man, if that's something, and anyone who's listening like is interested in like the idea of like pop punk or like post-hardcore, that kind of genre where it can feel very formulaic, very like just the same thing kind of over and over again and a lot of just repetition. I was going to put them in my top 5 songs, but I didn't because I wanted to do some homies and some other people who are not as big. But
right on.
Crime in Stereo, a Long Island hardcore band, is maybe one of my most influential artists of all time. They started way back in the day, like 20 years ago, but they're still playing, and they just put out a new album for the first time in 13 years. But these guys were doing things back in like 2007, 2008 that just no one in the scene was doing. They had so much guts, and it was low-key so ahead of its time. But yeah, just like they had these song structures that just blew me away, and at first I hated it because it felt so unfamiliar and so uncomfortable. And over time I was like, oh wait, these guys are just making songs and again doing the arrangements of the songs without any assumptions on how it has to be. And because that, some of those songs again became some of my favorites of all time. But Crime in Stereo is like a great version of like, I mean, they're kind of, some of their stuff is pop punk, but it's definitely more like post-hardcore kind of stuff, or like just general like Long Island hardcore. But it's hard to get out of that because the scene is just very it's definitely saturated with that. But there's also nothing wrong with like structure and people who are just set with kind of knowing what they are and what they like to write. But it's fun to kind of find the people who stray away and the kind of the cool music that comes out of it.
Yeah, a lot of my picks right now are actually for this episode are going to be bands that take kind of those genre formulas and flip them on their head.
Yeah.
So that's definitely some stuff that I'm really into. I've never heard of Crime in Stereo, but that's definitely something that I'm going to be looking up right after this because based off of that recommendation, it sounds like it's going to be awesome.
It's good. It's super good. And also, speaking of that, I was again going back to the Cacophony Kid episode. I can't remember what it was. Is it Race Car Bed? Is like the Irish band that you guys played?
Yeah.
Oh my
Race Car Bed are fucking sick.
dude, I was listening to it and I was just like on the train. I was like, all right, what's the first song gonna be? And it started playing and I was like, oh man, this is like crazy. It almost reminded me a little bit of like, I don't know if you listen to like Break-Ins at all on like TikTok.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, love Break-Ins.
It reminded me of that. And I was just like, yeah, man, this is just so fun and just so like unabashed and like outrageous and out of pocket. And yeah, man, I had a blast listening to it. It was such a good pick. But anyway.
I appreciate that so much. So another thing that I'm kind of interested in is I feel like a lot of your production recently has been leaning into, on top of the guitars and traditional like kind of punk instrumentation, been leaning into a lot of like synthesizers and like pads and soundscapes and things like that. Is that something that you've been getting into recently, or is that something that your producer that you've been working with brings to the table?
Oh, it's twofold. That's a great question. That's very insightful. Well, the first thing is that I've been obsessed with like ambient music since forever. I have an 8-hour playlist of ambient and piano music that I listen to when I read, and I'm adding to it constantly. It's just like a monolith at this point. But yeah, me and my family. I mean, I grew up listening to like Philip Glass and Steve Reich, and then as I got into college, got super into Brian Eno, got super into Nils Fromm. So I've been always into like synths, and I remember being in high school and in middle school even, and like friends' laptops like going into GarageBand because I didn't have it, and like messing around with pads. So I've always done that, and I mean, there was even a point where, again, I mentioned my best friend Tom is a director, and for his first short film that he premiered at a film festival, he actually asked me to compose the score for it. And so,
oh, that's awesome.
So I've done composition like that before. So ambient music and particularly like cinematic, like kind of like widespread ethereal music is something I've always had a passion for. And also one of my favorite musicians of all time is Trent Reznor. So I love Nine Inch Nails, and
that tracks.
And I love his soundtracks. Even though Allapartus like couldn't be farther away from that sound, it's so much more intense and extreme. So there's that aspect of like I just love atmosphere and ethereal music and synths and stuff. But then on the other hand, I've got my producer Colin, who also writes soundtracks and is a huge synth maniac in a level that I could never even touch. The first time I ever went to his studio, I mean, his walls are just covered in synthesizers. And on the side of like having his band in contrast, which is going to be one of my picks for today, he also has a second project called Behold. It's BE/HOLD, where he writes soundtracks for like D&D podcasts, where he's doing like medieval synthwave.
Really?
And he's like 90,000 listeners. He's huge. Like this soundtrack project that he has like blew up, and he doesn't promote it. Like he's just on these podcasts, and enough people find it through like radio and stuff, through Spotify, looking through like Dungeons and Dragons podcasts, that it just pops up. So yeah, it's definitely a combination of, there's a lot of common ground between the two of us on synthesizers. With him, it's like definitely much more a kind of like synthwave, kind of more analog kind of stuff. And with me, it's a lot more kind of atmospheric kind of stuff. But between that, yeah, I think that's very astute of you to pick out from there that, yeah, the kind of like more atmospheric stuff on the soundtrack very much comes from me and Colin coming, together. And then, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's something I've always wanted to get the chance to mess around with like hardware synthesizers a lot more, because like it's already super fun downloading, getting like software synthesizers to play in Logic and stuff like that. You can lose hours in that.
Yes.
But like something about having the hardware and getting tactile with being able to press buttons and turn knobs and move sliders and stuff like that is just so much more satisfying than, clicking on a screen to move stuff. It's something that I've been wanting to get into, but there's a bit of a financial barrier there.
Well, the good thing I think is that when it comes to artistry and the act of like being creative, which can sound so like douchey and so esoteric and like weird, but I do think like the act of like creativity is something that's so vital. And it's just the reality that, I mean, anyone knows, which is that like having more is not necessarily better. So having infinite choices, if anything, can actually like be a huge issue for creativity. And one thing that I love about hardware, and my one analog synth that I have that you can see like in the corner here, I bought it for $50 at the music shop that I worked at back freshman year of college. It was just some random used 80s synth, and it just makes cool sounds that is just like not ordinary sounds that you'd hear in Logic. So I bought it and I use it and it's great. But what's amazing about it is that there's limitations. There's this whole kind of idea. I like that I'm on top of like loving music, I'm a huge like film nut. And just like every other person who would describe themselves as a film nut, I really like Christopher Nolan. But Christopher Nolan has, oh my God, I'm like listening to myself. I'm like, Adam, you're insufferable. But no, Christopher Nolan is very cool. And there's this element that he brings up of like, everyone says that, to become like great, you have to break the rules to become great. And what he says is it's actually kind of the opposite. To become really, really great, what you do is you start making your own rules. And that's a huge part of his filmmaking technique, is that he develops boundaries for himself that he has to work within. And by doing that, he utilizes like the maximum amount of creativity within that defined space. And I'm sure there's a point where he does break through those boundaries, but the idea of like set a framework for yourself. You'll find out that, by climbing scaffolding, you'll do a lot more than trying to like just build up a giant plateau that just extends forever. But yeah, just the idea of, again, going back to what you were saying of the idea of like messing around with something that's hardware is like, yeah, man, I'll take one or two pedals over like an infinite supply of Logic pedals that I will never be able to listen to all of them and never really know which one is best because I'm overwhelmed by the infinite choice between all of them. So yeah, man, it's like anyone who has limitations, it's like embrace them and see how much you can expand, inside of them. And I think people will always be surprised by what comes out of that. Anyway, that's my creativity
I think I've
story.
heard people call that like choice paralysis, which is such a big thing because you're like, I need this tool, and then you're like, but I have 17 different things that all do that, and so you're like, which one do I want? And you don't necessarily learn how to exactly what each one does if you've got that many. It's funny. I've talked about what I call gear acquisition syndrome, which is just the idea that like you're working on something and you're like, I just need this piece of gear and then I can make it. And I felt like I was kind of in a rut for a long time with that. And once I got over wanting to buy new shit all the time was when I actually buckled down and learned how to use the stuff that I already had.
Yes.
And I think that for people, especially if you're just getting into production, that's a big thing is like, these pieces of software like Logic and Ableton and all these, they have so much good stuff baked into them that you should learn how to use that before, moving on to these other things. And I feel like this kind of sounds like such an old head thing to say, but it's like, it's just something that as you progress, I feel like you just kind of like figure that out for yourself in your own time,
I mean, it's like Rick Rubin or someone equivalent. I mean, I'm sure a million people have said something similar, or he just took it from someone else. But just the idea of like, if you're in the studio and you're working on a song, and like the one thing that's driving you nuts is that you don't have the right snare sound. It's not that you don't have the right snare sound; it's that your song isn't that good. Like if that's what's going to come down to whether or not the song is good, is whether or not you have the right snare hit. Like I got bad news for you. It's not the snare, and also just the idea of like. I remember like reading an interview of like Dustin Kensrue from Thrice, who's another one of my all-time favorite musicians, lyricists, just writers in general. But he talks about before Artists in the Ambulance, they were looking for a producer and they were talking to Rick Rubin because both of them were just big at the time. And the thing that they agreed on was just the idea of like, ultimately a song comes down to if you can play it on a piano or a guitar, just one or the other, and sing to it, and it's good, then it's a good song. If you're able to strip away all the production and it's a good song, then it's a good song. If you need the production and without it, the song falls apart, then it just means that the song is not complete or is not a good song to begin with. So the idea of like simplicity, you're totally right that it does sound kind of like a Luddite old head thing to say. But I think what that is not rejecting new technology or new formats or new ways of doing things, but understanding your arsenal and having mastery over a few tools is better than being a jack of all trades with 1,000. So understanding and making it has to do with like decisiveness and presence. And I think both of those play two of the greatest roles when it comes to creativity. So having the presence of mind to be like, this is the thing that I want to use, this is how I want to use it, rather than let me just see what I can do. Because then you just get lost. You get lost in the process of what ifs and what could be best. And maybe it's around the corner. It's like, just focus on here, like, right here, right now. What's going to be the best song?
Just kind of end up chasing the dragon a little bit to an extent. Yeah, for sure. So is there anything else about the stuff that you've put out over the past couple of years that you specifically want to talk about? Or do you have, I think that you had mentioned that you've got some more more songs in addition to the one that I've heard cooking up for next year, or this year now. Is that correct?
Yeah, totally. Right now, me and Colin have been working on a batch of songs over the last couple months, and the next one, the single after this, is basically we just have to do vocals and then it's done. And then after that, I have another batch of like 5 songs that right now I'm like completing, but are pretty much close to being done, that are ready to start getting recorded. And that's just like that's just the industry right now. Is that people are just always making songs and like preparing them, so it's just gonna be like a constant flow of seeing what goes out there, what sees success, what are we gonna drive, and also like just what feels good to play live and stuff. But yeah, there's
for sure.
Coalesce is coming out, then a couple other songs, but I'm really excited about it. I think over these last couple singles, I've been able to really narrow down on Allapartus as like an artistic identity, which people talk about things like branding, which can have kind of a, like not a great connotation, but I really do think about like what is the identity, what is Allapartus, what is Allapartus not, and understanding what that identity is. And there's a lot of stuff that I'm writing about right now that I'm really excited about. Coalesce I chose very consciously because it was kind of the initial seeds of that, of talking about things like alienation and isolation in the modern world, and the idea of like finding and determining self-worth and self-acceptance, which is something that's like very interpersonal. And Coalesce is very much about like, I don't want to dive in too deep because, I want anyone to have kind of their idea and their interpretation of it. But for me, at least, there is a definite, kind of idea that I take from it, which is this idea of self-acceptance and this rejection of self-sacrifice, particularly for systems that don't care about you, that think that you are disposable and think that you are just another cog. And also the acceptance of self and past self, the idea of like kind of accept who you are, accept the decisions that you've made, and love yourself for them, not in spite of them. And, you listen to like the bridge of Coalesce, and what it was for me when I was writing it was just this idea of like looking at the version of me, a couple years ago, and even 10 years ago, or even 20 years ago, that version of Adam that I used to maybe kind of cringe at, and kind of like, it used to make me, I used to not like talking about that version of myself. Really realizing that's like, man, that kid was a great kid, and I owe my whole life to him. He just did his best, and he didn't do everything perfectly. He didn't always get everything right, but he was a good guy. And like, the idea of living a life like, it's like, I became who I am, not in spite of that kid, but because of that kid. And all the songs that are coming after this, I think are going to become extensions of that, of the idea of like self, and are going to expand beyond just the personal self and into things like alienation in the world, in the market, in the economy. A lot of the songs that I'm writing right now are very focused on things like, the concept of freedom, the concept of like rights and stuff. In the last few years, I got involved in like labor and union politics in New York City. So working for people to get more workers' rights, and doing more mobilizing and organizing around doing stuff like that, doing strikes and speaking at rallies for other unions in the city. And so a lot of the songs that are
that's awesome.
A lot of the songs that are coming after this are very much about the idea of just like, a lot of the system seeks to invalidate you, and seeks to, this idea of like us feeling like we don't feel like we have a sense of self-worth. And I think that this is something that's so prevalent in our society amongst millennials, Gen Z, and will be Gen Alpha, of this idea of like, I'm not enough, especially with the dawn of social media. But the reality is like, that's not an accident that we feel that way. It's not an accident that we don't have presence of mind, that we don't have an attention span, that we don't have any kind of self-worth. It's because there's a system set in place that profits from it. And so I think the songs that are coming out are me thinking about that, and what are the ways that we can, have a more generative production view on the world and ourselves. And I'm really excited about it. The whole concept of Allapartus has to do with exploration, and I'm really excited for that next step of exploration, going kind of beyond the self and into the actual world itself. And yeah, so
I really like that, because I've kind of been going over that. I feel like it's something that is a perpetual thing, but kind of learning how to accept your self-worth, and that it's not tied to a number going up on the internet or anything like that. Because like as an artist or somebody on social media or whatever, it's so easy to just get deflated when something that you put all this time and effort into doesn't get the numbers that you want. And it's such a big thing learning to accept that that's just a thing. Stuff's going to fluctuate, and that doesn't make you any less worthy, quote unquote, because something that you put out didn't do as well as something else. And, kind of being able to divorce yourself from your work in a way because of that, but also getting closer to it at the same time, if that makes sense.
It makes me think of so many things. That is such a vital point, and that's something that you need to learn and you never stop learning throughout your life. There's no point that you understand that challenge and overcome it, because all of life is just overcoming that challenge. But there's this concept, and you'll see it in Allapartus art. If you look at like the Allapartus Instagram, you'll see it hidden in the art, is this concept of telos, Telos, which I think it was Aristotle who talked about this idea of telos, which like kind of, there's a lot of different interpretations of it, but the kind of like general translation is end purpose. What is the ending purpose for what you're doing? And the reality of it is like, there are very few people who work for the end purpose of working. There's very few people who work because they just love the pleasure of working. They're doing it because they want to make money. And why do they want to make money? They want to buy food. Why do they want to buy food or pay rent? They want to survive. They want to live. And ultimately at the end of it, what's the last thing that it's like, why do you want to live? Well, I just want to live. Like living is nice. I just want to live. That's the telos. And for me, like the thing I always come back to is like the act of creation, and particularly with like making music, is the telos for me. It's the end purpose. So whether or not the numbers go up or down, the act of making music is pleasurable and productive and generative to me. So in doing that, I'm never losing. I'm never going to be a failure, at least not in my eyes, because that act of creativity is like the best part of being alive. So trying to pay attention to those things in your life that you take pleasure in just for this act of doing them are the most important things that you'll ever do. And I think people experience that all the time in so many ways. It doesn't even have to be a big purpose like being a musician or being a scholar or being a fucking architect. It can be anything. It can be having a best friend. A telos can be your best friend. It can be a partner. It can be, doing yoga in the morning. It could be sitting on the couch and, playing Call of Duty. It can be whatever. But understanding like what's the purpose that you get out of it? What's the, kind of value that you get out of it? And as long as you set yourself up that way, and that was really the whole incarnation of like meeting my friend Colin, realizing I wanted to put more time into music, quitting my job, and then starting music, and then taking jobs that were more flexible, was all about spending more time and leaving more room in my life for the telos. And so I think that act of kind of finding value in yourself and if your life is all about chasing that. And that's, again, another very deep concept for Allapartus that, I think that's super on the money.
I love that. I'm always into these discussions about like the philosophy of being a creative person in a modern world that very much does not value that enough. And I think that this has been extremely insightful. Is there anything else that you specifically want to bring up before we move on to the second major part of the episode?
Ryan, what's your favorite song that you've ever written?
Right now, it's one that's unreleased that's going to be coming out on my EP, hopefully in February. It's one of the last ones that I have to mix before it goes out, but it's called Move On. And it's about a time in my life a few years ago that I was kind of in a dark place. There was COVID. I had just gotten laid off. I still do, but still had debt from going to school and things like that. And I was just like, I did everything that I thought I was supposed to do. I went to school. I got a degree. I did all of these things, and shit's still not working out for me. And it's kind of about the catharsis of creating music and using that as a way to kind of heal yourself in those moments.
Ryan, I mean, the one thing you need to remember is that, you went to school, you got all that debt, you got laid off, COVID happened. You need to realize that wasn't a waste. Ultimately, you created so much value for shareholders who owned that debt. And even though your life was miserable, just remember, there's probably like a quarter of a point on their portfolio value. That's all because of you, man. That's all you, and no one can ever take that away from you. But
I like it. That is my legacy.
on the real, though, it's like there's so much bullshit that everyone is put through that all has to do with money, making money, and sucking money out of working class people and giving it to people who the last thing they need is more money. But the act of kind of taking that process, that pain and that struggle, and making something creative and, again, generative out of that is like the coolest and the most punk thing that you can do. is taking
100%.
that struggle and then turning it into something that they can't use it as a profit center that has nothing to do with them and everything to do with you and your act of creativity. That's fucking rad, dude. That's amazing. I can't wait to hear it. That's incredible.
Thank you so
that's
much.
The last thing I wanted to hear about. That's what I needed to know.
Hell yeah! After we're done recording, I'll send you a link to listen to it early because I'm sure that you'll dig it.
Hell yeah!
So moving on to the second part of the episode here, we're gonna share some tunes that we've been listening to, some stuff that we think deserves to have a bit of a spotlight on it, stuff that's being underappreciated. I'm gonna go first, and we'll go back and forth, which will give you the closer at the end of this. My first song is actually one that was submitted to me directly. It's been super cool as the podcast has been getting bigger. I've had more and more artists reaching out to me directly to feature music on an episode. If you are listening to this and want to do that, freshfindspod@gmail.com. This is a band called Obscure Animals. They found me on Twitter and shot me an email. And they are a 4-piece alt-rock band from Austin, Texas. And this is their most recent single, which came out back in August, called It'll Be Fall Soon.
Is up 7 o'clock. The days stretch on too long. It's hot. The thermostat is working far too hard. The sweat on my brow pulls salt into my eyes. I stare at the sky, begging the stars and the moon to please come around. I can't escape in evening time, not even for a while. Sweat it out, fans on high. The AC can't keep up. The sweat on my brow pulls salt into my eyes. I stare at the ceiling, cursing the morning light outside my door. I look to the ground, frustrated and tired. Say to myself, it'll be fall soon. It'll be fall soon.
Short and sweet one there, but I like that tune a lot.
Holy shit, that was good. Oh my god.
I really like the going back and forth between the like heavy chord strums and then this little like staccato guitar part because it's a more minute scale, but just the difference between how those two parts feel is such a cool like back and forth.
There were so many like there's so many things that come to mind listening to that. I mean, it's like the number one, and I hate that this is always what everyone does, but it's just the normal way of like understanding music is that you put it in context and relate it to another band. But it's like the vocalist reminds me a lot of like like Julian Casablancas from like The Strokes. A lot of that vocal delivery, and honestly, I love it. I think that if anything, this is I've never been like a huge fan of Julian Casablancas. I feel like this is him if I actually liked his voice more. I feel like this is just the better version of him.
I was kind of thinking Smashing Pumpkins a little bit, but yeah,
for sure. And also very much in the Smashing Pumpkins wheelhouse is that the way that it is mixed, it feels like a 4-piece band in the best way possible, which is something that takes a lot of guts, honestly, because no one can hide if you're doing like, it feels like a 4-track where you got vocals, drums, guitar, and bass. And I feel like this could have been on like a 4-track cassette recorder. And the way guitars go so heavy, vocals cut through so deep. And then also like the bass during the chorus sounds incredible. The bridge is so heavy with the change up, but this very much is like there's nothing. It's so straight and to the point. We were talking about like simplicity and creativity. This feels like if they had 100 tracks and they cut out everything that wasn't necessary, and the song rocks because of it. It's dope.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely find it interesting because there is the tendency to layer and layer and layer with modern music production that is so enticing. You're like, well, this part I'm not like it sounds good, but it's not super interesting. Maybe if I do this on top of it, then it'll sound more interesting. Sometimes that's the case, but then other times you're just overcomplicating shit because you wrote something that you don't like. It's exactly what you were talking about earlier, and I think that this is definitely it's like the sound of alt rock kind of like distilled. It has that vibe of being very raw and really just showing off what you can do with only a few tracks, seemingly.
Yeah, for sure. I think that, again, just like I look at songs and number one, like, you were talking about the idea of, it's so easy to get tempted into like layering and adding all this extra stuff to kind of make it a little bit more rich, which I know nothing about. I don't know him, but every time if I'm struggling with a song, I'll try to break it down to its most base elements to kind of break through and finalize it. And this is like the kind of song that I would dream of writing. Is like if I really wanted something heavy that was simple, that was right straight to the point. Like this song kills it. So yeah, I'm impressed with how effective it is in its simplicity, but it still is so rich and hits so fucking hard.
Yeah, I do like this one a lot. I also think it's interesting that the lyrics are very much like they seem like they're literally like about, it's the middle of summer and I hate summer. I can't wait for, cooler weather. But I feel like it could also very much be, a metaphor for times of stress and, the feeling of like, just one more week and then things will finally slow down and it'll finally be chill. And, the idea that that's not necessarily always the case.
I was barely listening to the lyrics because I was just so obsessed with the melody. It's like all I was paying attention to, which is not normal. I'm usually so like locked up in the lyrics, but because I like the melody so much, I was like barely taken into it. But I love the idea of like being sick of summer and waiting for cooler weather. I spent my entire life in New York except for 10 months when I lived in California, and the number one thing that drove me crazy was the weather. I'm like the one person on earth, I fucking hate California weather. Just give me a boiling hot summer, a perfect autumn, and the most frigid, hellish winter of all time. Although right now we're 15 degrees above the median for the last 100 years, so it's not good. But that being said, I love the song about hating the summer and wanting to get to the winter. I feel a deep relationship to that.
No, I totally do as well. Like being from Michigan, we're definitely similar latitudes there, and so I've been disappointed by the lack of snow so far this year. Which, granted, I've also just moved 5 hours south of where I've pretty much lived for most of my life, and so the climate actually is surprisingly different, being only 5 hours further south.
Wow.
But a lot less snow as well, which has been interesting to get used to. I'm used to just these crazy drifts and shit,
Man, snow, I love snow, and can I tell you that getting rid of my car and moving into New York City where all my commuting is on the train, getting snow and not having to worry about snow traffic is like the greatest thing on earth. It's the beautiful cheat code of New York City. Anyway, that's my obnoxious tangent. Let's move on to the next track.
All right. Well, the next track is yours, so that's going to be for you to cue up there.
Alrighty. So for the next track, we're going to be moving on to my good friend Colin McClutchy, who is also my producer. He's got a band called In Contrast, and it's incredible. This is actually the reason why I met Colin, was that I randomly saw like some friend of a friend post this song from the EP that he was going to release. Came out and I listened to it, and I was just like, holy shit, this is so good. And it was at a point in my life where I was still working at my job, but I was like trying to reach out to people just to collaborate. I was so desperate to have like creativity in my life. I was just hitting up people, and a lot of it just didn't end up working out. I'd hang out with someone, it's like, there's not really any magic here. But I heard this record and was so shocked by how good it was and how well it was put together, how well it was produced, but also most importantly, how well it was written. And was like, I got to talk to this guy. And lucky enough, I have no idea why. I DM'd Colin, even though we went to the same college, we never met, and was just like, hey, this is like an amazing record. Would you ever want to like hang out maybe collaborate. And he's like, do you want to have dinner tomorrow night and just like chill? And the rest is history. 2 weeks later, I told my boss I was leaving my job. It was really that big of a deal. But a lot of that and a lot of Allapartus kind of is because of this EP, but it's fucking good. This particular song is called Lafayette Park, and yeah, let's check it out.
That's such a unique sound. I love that so much. It's like cinematic, grungy, emo music.
Yeah.
It's such a cool combo.
It fucking rocks, and it's just like, yeah, there was so much right off the bat that, like, when I first heard it, like you said, it's so unique. It felt so much like Colin had tapped into something that felt like, you can hear the influences. I mean, you can hear where a lot of it's coming from, but it felt so it felt very special, very personal. And I mean, it's just like, yeah, like there's parts of this that feel like just like an emo track. It feels like it could be something off of like Foxing or off of like The Hotelier. And then there's aspects of the violin which feels like it could be out of like a Death Cab for Cutie song, or like, out of like one of my favorite bands is Stars from Montreal from like the early 2000s. But oh my God, yeah, the instrumentation is just fucking sick. There's so much stuff all over the place, but I remember hearing it being like, oh my God, this is special.
And the production is crystal clear too. You can hear everything so well. Like, and that's another thing, is that like production often comes down to, a good arrangement, like we've talked about before, and having elements that, support each other well. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's really cool having the strings along with the like kind of emo-ish guitar and everything. It's a really cool, very unique sound. I like that a lot.
Yeah, for sure. And this one again, it's like the last one I like wasn't listening to lyrics as much as I should have been, but the first time I listened to this, it's the same stuff, man. It's something that you were just talking about with kind of like a couple of years back having that really difficult time. And when I listened to this, it was like I was working a job that I hated. I didn't hate the people. I didn't necessarily like, I hate the company. I hated the work that I was doing. I knew it wasn't what I was supposed to be doing. But that idea of kind of like isolation, lacking wholeness, that kind of day after day of just kind of your days not going the way you would hope they would. And it was funny because it's like I felt so seen. And then when I met Colin, when he told me about writing this EP, turns out he was going through all the same shit that I was. And that's why when we connected, it felt like he had, like, I can't remember if it was like a year or so prior, had left his job to pursue his passion full time. And he's a full-time engineer now.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so when I saw that, I got one hit of that, and it's like he didn't have to ask me twice. I saw that and I was like, holy shit, like this is all I need. And I just jumped off the boat into the ocean of doing something other than just the typical 9-to-5 that I've been doing for years at that point. But no, it's him describing that point in life of just kind of life not going your way and feeling that hardship is like so potent, and the ending of it, of that line of, I'm not better yet, and then it fades off into the reverb with the violins. It just fucking crushes me every time.
Oh, yeah.
And he killed it. He kills it with it.
I think it's really interesting too, going back to your story, and how just one moment in that way can kind of like set a whole new trajectory for your life and the goals that you have and your aspirations. Like, that one moment is such a defining aspect of what your musical career is now, as opposed to what it was even just a couple of years ago. I think that's awesome.
I know that, like, I'm going to say this in Colin. I know exactly what Colin's response to this would be, which is, Adam, it wasn't the song. You were going to end up doing this no matter what. I just happened to be the person there at the right time. But I can't like stress enough, like, for anyone who hears this or ever like, listens to this, it's like, if there's some random person on Instagram or online that you think is really cool that you'd love to work with, just fucking ask them to work with you. Just do it. The worst thing that's going to happen is they're going to say no. And if that person thinks you're lame or something, or they if they talk trash about you or something, it's like that was someone who was never worth working with to begin with. But when you find your people, and when you find like someone who might become a very close friend of yours, that person's gonna be like, hell yeah, let's do it. And I went through, at that time, I talked to tons of people who I never ended up working with, and a bunch of things that ended up going nowhere. But that like 1 in 10, it's so worth it. Trust me, it's so worth it. Just DM someone and just say, hey, you want to hang out sometime and make music? Just fucking do it. It's worth it, I promise.
That's one of the things I've learned doing this, is that so many people probably, like, you think about like, oh, this person, they're probably so far above me, like I'm not even gonna send them a message because they won't get back to me or whatever. But think about you, if somebody reaches out to you directly and goes, hey, I like the thing that you're doing, you're gonna feel good about that. You're not gonna talk shit about them, and everybody's just people at the end of the day. And I think it's such a funny thing that, especially with social media, because you see, a big number, somebody's got like, 10,000 followers or something like that. And so you're like, oh man, they hit the big time. It's like, at the end of the day, they're just a person. If you message them, more than likely the worst thing that's going to happen is that they just don't get back to you. Like, yeah, it's so funny, and I find myself messaging bands that I'm into all the time now because I'm just like, oh
Yes.
yeah. I mean, if they're like me, then they'll take 5 minutes to just be like, oh yeah, cool, and you've made a new contact, potentially a new friend.
Everyone is just some guy. That's a thing that we say a lot in like union work. It's
Yeah.
like there's no person at the top. Everyone is just some guy.
I like
Everyone
that.
is exactly the same as you. And I mean, that's literally how this ended up coming to be. Like you randomly found me through like a TikTok that I posted, and I just ended up like messaging you back. And I just saw your stuff. I was like, yeah, this is cool. Let me just message him and see what happens.
Yeah.
And then I followed your stuff, and it ended up being really great. What happens is, and this is honestly one of like the wonderful things about, especially when you're starting off, that I think about all the time is like, man, no one cares who I am. Like I'm nobody. Like, what's the worst that's going to happen? Someone's going to say no. Then I'm exactly where I was when I started. I have everything to gain and nothing to lose by asking someone,
exactly.
hey, do you want to work on something? Like, it's fine. There's so much beauty in being nobody at the moment. So take advantage of it. Use it as a superpower.
Oh, 100%.
You're nobody. Take chances.
You've got nowhere to go but up at that point. It's great.
Yeah. It's once we get successful, that's when it's going to get terrifying. Once we have something to lose, then, oh my God, I have to start being conscious of repercussions. I never want to have to deal with that.
All right. So my next tune is by a Connecticut pop punk band called Cinema Stare. They're a band that I found because somebody that I followed on Twitter, I think it might have been Cacophony Kid, going back to that episode, posted about them, and they were just like, oh man, the guitar tones on this record are just amazing. I had never heard of this band before, and so I'm like, well, I have to check that out then if they've got these, amazing guitar tones. And this album, which is called The Things I Don't Need, came out back in May of 2023. And after I discovered it, quickly became one of my go-to, like, just put it on when I'm doing stuff albums, because it's just so much fun to listen to. This song is called Remember by Cinema Stare.
But take seconds to change. Carry what you said with me more than anything before. But don't you throw your love away. Remember staying up all night. Give your hand to mine. Remember tripping over time. Lose your state of mind. And when the words don't come out right, you were still the only one on my mind. Try to remember. Keeping my cool and passing your colors and having plates. It makes me nervous to think I'll have to see your face. But then you'll call me, which makes it sound so easy. I've not been thinking clearly, and so you'll say, remember staying up all night. Give your hand to mine. Remember tripping over time. Lose your state of mind. And when the words don't come out right, you were still the only one on my mind. Try to remember. Try to remember.
cinema stare. Holy shit,
Right?
that was good.
No, this is like one of my
Oh my-
favorite songs of the past year. It's so good.
Oh my god. Oh my god. God damn. That you go first. You go
Okay.
first. Tell me about it.
So yeah, one of the things that I really love initially is like you listen to it, you're like, okay, this is kind of neat, and then those like super compressed, like almost bit crushed like drums come in at the beginning, and it goes off so hard. It's so much fun.
Wait, there's nothing like just ringing outrageous bit crush drums. Originally, the last single that Allapartus put out, "Spinning in the Driveway," that's what the drums were for the whole thing.
Oh,
It was just
really?
like obnoxious.
That's
and
so
it's like
much
this really
fun.
pretty, beautiful like love song. It's just. But no, I love that we would. Colin uses this effect all the time. This devil lock sound toys effect.
Yes.
That is so locked into like this kind of sound. And yeah, exactly. It's like when it first starts, like it's pretty with the guitar lick and everything. And then once those comes in, it's like, oh my god, I'm on my way to the pit. I'm on the way to the pit to end someone's life to this song. So good.
I also love how it takes a lot of like modern elements, but the bass of the song is very much like a classic pop punk song. You think like early 2000s kind of sound. It's like just the way that the guitar riffs and everything, but they also use a lot of instrumentation that's not common, like the organ or the Rhodes or whatever in the second verse and things like that. And I love how they play with instrumentation and very much take something that a lot of people are extremely familiar with and like flip it on its head.
So something that this, like, I wrote a bunch of notes for this, but one thing that this kind of song and this kind of band, I imagine, like, makes me really excited about for like the next 10 years of music is when pop punk stops being like, kind of like, a very modern, very contemporary kind of genre, and in some ways almost becomes kind of like a traditionalist genre. This is like a weird kind of thing. Like I'm gonna see if I can verbalize this correctly.
Okay.
But when I heard like the whoa parts at the end, I was like, this is like classic pop punk.
Yeah.
This is like taking elements which are not like, it's not particularly novel, but when you execute it right, it's so much fucking fun and it's so satisfying to listen to. And this song feels like, so what it's reminding me of with this idea of like having this version on some kind of like traditionalist type of music, I'm thinking of like the Gaslight Anthem in relation to like Bruce Springsteen.
Okay.
We had Bruce Springsteen, who 30 years before the Gaslight Anthem was created, wrote all these songs, went on tour and took over the world. Gaslight Anthem comes along, writes a lot of stuff that's very much in that vein and is clearly influenced by it. They're not claiming to do something that's a totally new genre that's unlike anything else. It doesn't have everything that's totally novel, but it doesn't execute it in a way that is so like honest and so self-aware that it feels so authentic. So this feels like such authentic early 2000s pop punk. I mean, the whole like the is so like, I immediately got transported, even though it's not the same riff and it's not the same beat. It's like listening to Fat Lip by Sum 41 for the first time.
No,
it just crushes.
Exactly. I think that's another thing that I really like in modern music is when people can take a classic sound and make it sound fresh, but also clearly recognizable as the classic thing that they're referencing. And like there's something about like the gang vocals with the whoa part and like all that just feels so classic, but also like extremely fresh because that's not really being done a whole lot anymore.
And there's something to be said of like standing by your influences and being kind of like, okay, I've said unabashed like 4 times on this interview so far, but it's just like the idea of like just very unabashed. It's like it's not trying to be something else. Like they're being exactly who they are.
Oh yeah.
And like you're saying, like the organ part, I immediately think of like, man, this was like a pop punk song. And now all of a sudden there's this like, this almost like feels like part of a Tiger's Jaw song and like kind of like an indie emo track. But it's definitely, it feels fresh. It feels great. It's so fucking cool. And the singer is unbelievable. Her voice and her delivery is killer. The 3 harmonies at the end of the bridge going into the last chorus, I just like wanted to scream. It sounds so good. Such perfect execution. Such perfect vocal delivery was so good. And oh my God. Yeah, dude. It was what an absolute track.
This is
Good
personally
Lord.
my favorite on the record, but if you dig this song, you'll like the entire album. It is phenomenal from front to back. Bad is a good is a great song. Real Problems, all of these songs are just super cool. I go back to this album and listen to it like at least once a week, just because it's so good. I love to just use it as a mood enhancer, basically. Going and doing other stuff, and it's like put that in the background. I know I'm gonna have a better time.
Man, dude, it feels so good to listen to. This is literally like I have Spotify open up and I'm just like saving these songs so I can listen to them later. I'm so stoked on this. Yeah, Sinister, fucking killer, outrageous.
All right, what do we have up next? How are you gonna follow that up?
I'm not gonna lie. I'm feeling pretty confident about it.
All right, hell yeah.
I'm kind of making some adjustments. But anyway, the next song is gonna be my homie Danny's band Big Nitro, and this I won't even do. I'll go over everything after. But yeah, man, Big Nitro fucking rocks. It's just the whole vibe behind it is just like, man, race cars and just like F1 and just Ricky Bobby going fast, and I fucking love it.
I wake up in the morning, I piss excellence.
But this is the lead single off of their debut EP. The song is called Where We're Going. Let's check it out.
Don't try to stop me. So it'd be smart to put the phone down. Take a guess as to where we're going. Too many places we have to choose from. Take a guess as to why we're leaving. Too many reasons we have to choose.
Oh, hell yeah, dude.
Yeah, dog.
Again, it just feels so classic, man. It's so much fun.
Right. So same thing happened that I thought wouldn't happen, but phone storage on my fucking on my phone got filled up. I just switched
shit.
over to my computer.
Okay.
You want to do another clappy boy for this?
As long as your audio is still rolling, we should be set.
Then we're done. Then I have a new
Awesome.
angle. Suddenly people get a new angle. They get to see my pretty face even more. No
Holy
problem.
cow. Crazy.
So that's Big Nitro. That's actually Danny, the drummer of Allapartus. This is his band.
Okay,
so this
right
is
on.
him as the lead singer and the guitarist, and this is like again like this whole crew of people. All of us have our own bands where we are the front person.
Yeah.
But Danny, yeah, man, he put out Big Nitro and he put out this track first. And I called him immediately. I sent him a photo of myself just screaming.
This is one
because I
hell
was
of
just
a
like,
debut.
dude, it's like, and that's the thing is like he hasn't like done any huge like tour or anything. You know, there's been a couple shows and stuff, but he could tour this album like easily.
Oh,
It's
easy.
all so fucking good. But I told him, I was like, this is a song that's from a long lost Tony Hawk Pro Skater soundtrack.
Absolutely. Yes.
It's right in that wheelhouse. You throw this like, you know, next to like Superman by Goldfinger. You throw this next to Guerrilla Radio from Rage Against the Machine. It's just so, oh my God, man. It's just so rock and roll, straight to the point. And Danny, on top of being an unbelievable drummer, he shreds all the guitar. That's all him soloing and stuff. He's outrageous.
That was one of the things I wanted to bring up was the leads are so much fun. And I like that there are leads throughout too, because I feel like that's something where
Yes.
you're starting to get like, oh, there will be a lead guitar for a lead guitar solo designated area. But I think that having a counterpoint to the main melody of the vocals, having the vocals and then the vocals take a second and there's just a really cool guitar lick that melts your face off
Yes.
for a second and then back into the vocals is so
Yeah.
much fun. And this you said that they don't even play live a whole lot, or they do play live around New York but just haven't really gone to other areas.
They've played one show, and I actually filled in on bass for the show. So I was just like, I was in the same way he plays drums for me, I played bass for him. And yeah, man, it was great. We played with these guys, Inner Love from New York, who are from Long Island, who are amazing. They're another band that like anyone should check out. Very, very like awesome kind of like indie emo pop punk kind of stuff. But we played a show with them in Queens, and yeah, it was killer. But Danny is just like, oh God, he's such a crazy talented artist. He also just put out this new single just recently that he just wrote as like a one-off. And where we're going, I feel like is so good. It just it brings you in, it sucks you in right away, which is why I wanted it to be my choice. But A Simple Breeze, the newest single that he put out, is as good or even better in certain respects. But yeah, dude, Big Nitro is so good. It just goes straight to the point. It's so hard. And it also just, because he's a drummer, you listen to the music and it's very similar. I compare him a lot to Dave Grohl and the Foo Fighters.
Okay.
In that it's rock music that you can tell is written by a drummer, because it's not just straight, like, you know, four on the floor kind of like beat drumming. There's lots of great little like upswings. There's lots of little chains ups. There's amazing transitions, but it's very rhythmic, guitar driven rock music, and it fucking slams.
That's the thing. I heard this song. I've heard it one time, and I'm already like, I would go see them live if they came through town. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
This would be fucking rad as hell.
Honestly, them and Cinema Stare, I'd go to that show any day of the week.
That would be a fucking sick ass show. Those two bands together would be a great lineup. We should book a tour.
Done. I mean, hey, they're right around the corner, and yeah, man. I mean, I would call out a sick. I'd be stretching all day, getting ready to come out of Mosh retirement for this show and ruining everyone's night. Yeah, dude.
Real.
I love Big Nitro. It's almost like a meme with all of us. It's like kind of a joke how much my whole friend group, we're all obsessed with Big Nitro. Danny was like, yeah, I just wrote these songs. I thought they were fun. I just wanted to put them out into the world, and we're all like such hardcore Big Nitro stans now.
That's funny. No, I will definitely be following this band because they just fucking kill it, man. So my next song is by a band another one that I found on Twitter. Twitter has kind of been like my main social media recently. For a little while it was Instagram, for a little while it was TikTok. I feel like it's like every 6 months to a year I just kind of like move on to another thing to be what I'm addicted to on my little screen. But this band is called The Welcoming. And I remember I was debating back and forth about whether I was going to play this song or a different one. And the thing that made me choose this song was that you mentioned that you really like Thrice, because these guys also specifically label Thrice and A Perfect Circle as some of their big influences. It's kind of, they're in between like rock and metal. It's one of those things where like if you told a metalhead that this is a metal song, they'd get upset with you, but like it's heavier than like hard rock, if that makes sense.
It's a joke amongst my whole crew that like I go to the I go to like the hardcore shows and everyone thinks I'm like the cute like pop kid because I make like pop music, and then I go to like my friend's indie show and everyone thinks I'm like the really brutal like heavy head, and so in every group everyone thinks I'm just like some weird guy when it's really like, I mean, the hardcore guys probably have it more right. I'm just like a little soft boy, but yeah, I totally know those kinds of genres and those people who exist in those spaces. I feel that.
I always find it so funny because it's like I have trouble labeling my music as well, because I'm like, it's kind of punky, kind of metal, but also none of those things at the same time. So it's like, I've mentioned it before, I think that we're kind of in a post-genre era where everybody's just taking influences from everything, and you can just kind of call it whatever ethos you fit. I feel like it is really, really where it lands. But anyway, so this song is off of this band's most recent EP called Neptune, which came out back in October. A lot of these last couple songs that I'm going to play are going to be bands that I meant to feature and then just never got around to it for one reason or another. But anyway, yeah, I would call them like melodic progressive rock. So this song is The Unknown.
There is a quiet savagery under the surface of the sea. At the first sign of frailty, the sharks will feast upon us as we bleed. Standing at the edge, wholly motionless, peer into the depths and see their cunning silhouettes, dovetail with the waves, cleverly obscured, waiting till the time is right.
What a fucking ripper, man.
I like this escalation. I feel like we have an arms race right now.
Oh, yeah.
And I couldn't be more excited for my next track because I think we're going neck and neck. That shit rocks. Holy fuck. Oh my god. One thing that's just like, I mean, it's like immediate. It's like right off the get-go is because we've been playing more shows, I'm like updating my rig.
Okay.
And I've got a tiny little pedal board so that way it's easier to just run around New York City rather than because I don't have a car to lug it around in. I need something I can put in my backpack and jump on the bus. And I have this little rat clone that I built myself that I love. That's an amazing pedal that I'm super proud of, but it's a little finicky. And it's like sometimes at a live show, it'll kind of like cut out for a second or something.
Okay.
So I replaced it with a great Walrus Audio like Eras pedal, which is just a drive pedal. So I've been listening to drive settings constantly. And I've become so obsessive now. And it's destroying my life. And there's some songs I listen to, I'm like, oh God, this drive is just so not good. This comes on and immediately I'm like, oh my God, the drive is perfect.
Yes.
The guitar tone is so immaculate.
No, that's one of the things. Like when I hear this song, my first thought was Guitar Hero.
Yes.
Like,
oh my God.
like it kind of harkens back to like that era of like progressive rock, and also just like this dude shreds, man.
Yes.
Like the harmonies at the very end, fucking like just cherry on top, so good. But like I also really like in this song too, and a lot of their stuff, which is that they've got these very cathartic choruses, but then these like the other parts of the song are kind of like brooding, and they have this like weird groove to them that's like off kilter in a way that like builds a lot of tension. And I think that that's a really cool way that they play with like the dynamics of a song, is that they build up all of this like brooding tension. And with this song, I think it works great because it very much matches the theme of the unknown and like deep below the ocean and, you know, all that kind of stuff. But like just the way that they put those two things together is so much fun.
There's one of the things I was writing down is the idea of like when it comes to like more progressive kind of heavy music like this, you have a lot of like syncopated stuff. Like, you know, you listen to something like Animals as Leaders and it's like lots of syncopated drums and guitars and stuff. And it's very, the one thing that Animals as Leaders, like they were smart with is they never added a vocalist, which is brilliant because it's really fucking hard writing vocals onto that music that sounds good. But the way that this, that the instrumentals are so staccato and so driven and rhythmic and kind of sharp, but then the vocals are so smooth. It gave me a lot of like, I mean, I was thinking about like Chino Marino along with someone like Dustin Kensrue from Thrice, but yeah, I just wrote super smooth. And then as I was writing super smooth, the heavy vocals came in and I just wrote in all caps, heavy fucking vocals. So good. Do you know whether or not that's the same, is that the singer also doing the heavy vocals?
I believe it's the same guy who does both, yeah.
Either way, it's impressive. If it's the same person, it's outrageous.
I believe that this project actually, the first, which I believe is a full length. I'm gonna check so that I don't make myself look like a doofus. Yeah, it's a full length that they put out back in 2021. But this was actually a solo project initially, and then and so it's the one guy who played guitar and I believe did bass and like the whole thing. I don't know what all of his credits were on the first record, but I know that he at least like wrote most of it and performed most of it. And yeah, he's, I believe, the main vocalist and guitar player, and dude just kicks ass, man.
Oh my God, it's so good. And listening to like the lyrics, it also again like you know, they mentioned like Thrice as a you know, an inspiration for them. The idea of like Dustin Kensrue uses a lot of things from like Greek mythology in a lot of his writing. So we'll talk about like Daedalus and Icarus and stuff like that. And I'm not sure if they're talking about a specific thing, but the whole idea of like the ocean stuff and the idea of like the depths and even looking at the art, like the idea of like Neptune and stuff, using concepts that are like from culture, from whether it's ancient or contemporary, and using it as a way to expand on a concept of like a personal journey is like one of the coolest. It's one of the oldest tricks in the book. I'm sure they were doing it back in Macedonia and prehistoric age, but they're doing it today. And honestly, it's like, man, it hit 10,000 years ago. It still hits today.
Oh yeah,
but yeah,
for
dude,
sure.
That shit fucking rocked. Oh my God, that was so good.
Again, highly recommend checking out both this whole EP and their first album. It's so funny actually how I found them, because I think the first post I interacted with was they called it shameless self-promotion playlist, was something that they were making. And it was literally just this guy was compiling a playlist of a bunch of like independent artists who wanted to have their song put on a playlist. So the idea was use submit a song, it gets put on the playlist. Everybody listens to the playlist, and then you've all got some cool ass new music. And they put that together, and their stuff definitely like stood out from the pack, in my opinion, because it was just so tight, so heavy. And that was before this EP came out. That was the first album, which is also a great album to listen to like at the gym and stuff like that too. So good.
And that kind of like community building is so vital, because honestly, it's like, especially for people who might like, be starting off or getting into music, it's like, without a doubt, like from my experience and the people I know who are successful, who I wouldn't necessarily lump myself in as a successful person, but the best fans, the best people who will appreciate your music are always other artists. Other musicians always end up being the people who love and are so dedicated to your stuff. So it doesn't surprise me that again, someone like this would make like kind of like a community building playlist, and then that would drive them. Because again, it's like the people who will love and appreciate your music the most are other people who can appreciate creativity.
So where are we going? What's next in our heavy musical arms race?
So this is going to be, I think this will be the pinnacle until the very end, like 2 tracks later. But this is a band called Chain Twist, and the drummer from this band is an old friend of mine, Ryan, who we used to play together like 10 years ago. Like Ryan saw Allapartus way back in the day, and Ryan bought like the CD we made of like the initial EP. He's also been begging me to put it on Spotify for the last 10 years. I told him $1 million in my bank account. I'll put it on right now.
Sounds fair.
So far, he's not obliged. I think he's being unreasonable. But he's got this band Chain Twist that he plays drums in, that he's been sending me like mixes, and he's been sending me like just little like snippets since it started. And their escalation in sound is outrageous. But this is Chain Twist out of New England, and they fucking slay. Let's check it out.
All right.
Yeah!
fuck? Fucking New England hardcore, man. I swear to God.
Dude, this shit is, oh god, I like the beat at the beginning, like that little just like gets you so ready from the get-go. When the vocals come in, it's just like, it just sets the house on fire, man. This whole track is outrageous.
I also really like the sort of like industrial kind of sound at the very beginning too, with like all the sound design and things like that.
Yes.
And the way that it incorporates, like you were talking about, the beat, which is kind of like it's almost like a muted 808 kind of sound. And
totally.
I think it's really cool how a lot of metal and hardcore and metalcore and like all this stuff is pulling from the ideas of nu metal, but like adapting it to the modern times and the modern sounds of hip hop, and the way that you put them together, I think is so cool. And I think that the nu metal ideas working with the more extreme metal genres, as opposed to more like radio rock, kind of like how nu metal was in its early days, I think is fucking sick.
Yeah, no, they kind of like brand themselves as New England nu metal, but they spell the new in New England as NU, which I think is amazing. But no, it goes back to what I was saying with like Cinema Stare, where it's like these ideas of these genres that back in the day were like, oh, these are just like trendy. This is just like trendcore, and people are gonna feel the same way. Like pop punk is becoming its own genre that has like a rich tradition at this point.
Yeah,
nu metal has the same thing. Slipknot sells out arenas all the time, and they have for 20 fucking years. Like these bands are institutions at this point. And I'm sure, honestly, I mean, like genres like hyperpop are going to be the same way. 100 Gex like could very well become like a similar type institution. But when you have these moments that are just like a part of a style, it is so rich, and just goes to show that there still is like so much that this genre could put out really, take it to the next level in the next like 10 years, which I get really excited about. But there's a lot that you can hear coming from like Slipknot, and also me and Ryan have talked about the band My Ticket Home, which put out Strangers Only, years back, which were like originally they were like a crabcore band, but they kept on innovating.
Really?
And honestly, this kind of sound they put out years ahead of everyone else. Like they really kind of saw around the curve what was coming, and they really kind of they jumped on the trend before anyone had even smelled it. But also like just the idea of like the record scratches and stuff in it, just the slamming drums. And I'll say, like, I was joking about the idea of like snare sounds, that like, hey, if your snare sound, it's not that big a deal. If you're worried about that, you don't have a great song. Ryan is the one exception. The snare sound on this is fucking perfect, and it means the world to this song.
I also really like, do they have two vocalists, or is it one guy doing two different like vocal styles?
Two vocalists. Yeah, they've got a clean singer, and then they got the heavy singer.
I like how even the quote unquote clean singer has so much grit and attitude to it. But I also really like, as far as the production goes, that they are processed very differently. So the back and forth between them in the section where he does a line and then the other guy does a line, back and forth, they occupy different places in the mix, because the one guy has a lot more atmosphere, and so it sounds a lot more like it's part of. I always think of like mixing vocals as like they can either kind of be like in their own space, or they can be part of the mix. And like often for like rock and metal, you tend to have the vocals a little bit lower and have a little bit more ambience to them, so that they sound like they're just another instrument, as opposed to like a pop mix, which the vocals are going to be a bit more separate. And I like how they kind of did both on that, where the clean singer was a little bit on top and a little bit, a little bit more polished, and then the unclean, whatever you want to call it, harsh vocalist has a lot more of that like ambience, and sounds a lot more like he's part of the band, if that makes sense.
No, I 100% agree. I think you're right on the money. It's almost like when the vocalist is like screaming, it feels like it's coming all around you. I feel like I'm running through the forest, and in the trees I can hear the voice coming from all around. But then when the clean singer comes in the chorus, I feel like someone's grabbed me by the shirt and is like yelling in my face.
It's piercing. It's like dead in the middle. Yeah.
Oh, and it's so good. It hits so hard. It cuts through the mix so well. It's like, and it feels effortless. It's such smooth production. But yeah, man, Chain Twist, they fucking kill it. Like, I'm dying for them. I've told them, like, the moment that they want to book a New York show, like, I would give anything to get them in with some of, like, the hardcore metal bands in New York City, because they would crush it. Like, I tell them all the time, these guys could do a national tour in a heartbeat. All they need is the right audience, so these guys will slam.
That was the first thing I thought of when I heard this, was I was like, this would go hard as fuck live.
Yeah, absolutely. No, man, Chain Twist, they kill it. Ryan's the man.
So cool. All right, so my next one, I'm gonna bring it down a little bit. The arms race is over. We've declared a winner.
Perfect.
But these guys definitely do their fair share of heavy stuff as well. This is a band called Statements, and they are from Baltimore. These guys are a modern pop punk band in every sense of the word. It's like hyper compressed, in your face pop punk. They put out their first EP in, I believe, September of last year, and
hell yeah,
phenomenal batch of songs. But this next one is actually it's the middle track of 5 on the EP, and this is a bit more of a somber one, and I think that it stands out from the rest because it's so different as far as how it's orchestrated and put together. But unfortunately, I feel like looking at the streaming numbers, it's severely underrated. So I wanted to show off this one because I think it's fucking sick and everybody should listen to it. So this song is called Meantime.
The city's keeping tabs on the weather, and now the parking lot's a mountain of salt. It sprays my windshield, creeps into the air, and I can feel it in my lungs. I don't know anyone else here, at least the furnace arm is keeping me warm. And I've been trying to plot the outcome that gets me closer to the door. I've been reaching my limit of all the fucks I could convince you I give. About your new job down on Church Street. It ain't much, but it's a way to live. I'm trying to keep together, and now the alcohol is making me sick. I don't have much to remember, another song to forget. Shitty end of December, inside a night to regret. I drag my carry-on down each apartment step. I couldn't remember the time or place or how we met. When the sun comes up, I'll be right back where I started. At least I'm hanging on for the meantime. You've got no cards and I've got no plans. Shifting embers on sinking quicksand. At least I'm hanging on for the meantime. Giving up on the potholes, and I can't keep the feeling out of my lower back. I don't know where I can get to, because there's nowhere else I'd rather be. And it's funny how it hits me before I pull up to the door, that at least I'm playing social instead of sleeping on my floor. You're moving mountains, and I'm always one step behind. I start problems and don't give a fuck how to solve them. It's fine, it's fine. When the sun comes up, I'll be right back where I started. At least I'm hanging on for the meantime. You've got no cards and I've got no plans. Shifting embers on sinking quicksand. At least I'm hanging on for the meantime. I don't think twice when I'm driving alone. Late nights, eyesight, just staring down at my phone. Maybe I'll finally slip out on the bed where the eyesight's in anticipation. Maybe I'll fucking explode. I can almost hear sirens from the station. I'm sorry. sorry, I don't wanna be here. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. So when the sun comes up, I'll be right here. I'll be right here where I started. At least I'm hanging on for the meantime. You've got no cards and I've got no plans. I've got nothing at all. At least I'm hanging on for the meantime. And now I'm hanging on for the meantime. And now I'm hanging on. I hope I'm hanging on for the meantime.
Wow.
I figured you of all people would
my
really
God.
appreciate the build in this one.
Yeah, man. God damn. This is like, this is going to sound so backhanded, and it's not. It's like, number one, this is an incredible song. What's unbelievable is that they do so many things that I typically am not a huge fan of, and they just effortlessly execute. Like, the first thing is that, like, doing kind of like a stripped down acoustic song, like, for so many people, I feel like can end up being kind of a loser unless you're like Ben Gibbard in Death Cab for Cutie.
Sure.
But the fact that they have like an acoustic sound that is so rich, and especially in the chorus with the bells and all of the ear candy, the mix is so good in this. It feels so good to listen to. Instead of something that feels like a barrage, it just feels like a cool breeze. But going into it is like, yeah, the chorus is so rich. And also there's moments in like the initial verse. Again, another thing that I'm not usually a huge fan of. Usually not a huge fan of like operatic stuff or kind of like musical sounding stuff. But this also, maybe it's because I just listened to it for the first time in a long time. I did a lot of plays in high school and ended up fucking hating theater. But the one show that I still love is Rent. And Rent is like a pop punk musical. So many of the songs are so rock driven and so like guitar tone, like drive driven. But there are moments of this that almost brought me into like some of my favorite songs from that play. But it's definitely operatic. Also reminds me a little bit of like 21st Century Breakdown, which people talk shit on as like not a great Green Day album. I disagree. I think it has some amazing tracks on it.
Okay.
And some of the best tracks off of that album, again, this also reminded me of. But then, oh my God, the transition at the end, it's just unbelievable. I was not expecting it. And again, it's like, you know, oh, they took a soft song, they made it heavy, but it's so killer. It's so fucking good. Oh my God.
Well, their entire like production, when it gets into that part, that's a lot more akin to what the rest of the EP sounds like, as far as these like super in your face, very like left, right, hard panned, hyper compressed guitars and, you know, all that. But I think that it's super cool. One of the production elements that I really like that you didn't mention is in the first verse, there's some sort of, I don't know exactly what it is. It sounds like maybe like a reverse delay or like some sort of sound that is just like lays a foundation underneath the vocal and the guitar that makes a really neat texture. Kind of sounds like, to me, I interpret it as like swirling voices. You've got these voices in your head that you are constantly being berated by or whatever. And so like these like reverse delay kind of things kind of sound to me the way that they're used as like kind of referencing, you know, the headspace that the person's in during the verse, which I think is super cool. I always love contextual sound design stuff like that that like goes along with the message but also just works with the song.
No, the idea of like chaotic sound design and stuff when people are like going through some sort of like turmoil, the idea of, again, like this swirling atmosphere around you. I honestly, I remember listening to the tone, but I hadn't even thought of that. And that's the kind of thought I would have in 2 years after listening to it for 2 years. That I'm just like, oh my God, like how did I not see that? That's
I've been listening to this for 4 months straight, so. I also there's something about the tone of the acoustic guitar. I personally am not a huge fan of really bassy acoustic guitar sounds, like the big dreadnought guitars and acoustic guitars and stuff like that. I tend to think that they really only sound good in like a solo performer context, and in a mix, I like acoustic guitars that are a lot more like mid-range and kind of jangly sounding. And so this, I think they might have used a 12 string, or they used like an acoustic guitar in like Nashville tuning, which is basically just all of the high strings of a 12 string guitar. There's something about like the jangly mid-ranginess of it that I really enjoy. It sounds very satisfying to me in a way that like a lot of just basic strummed acoustic guitar parts don't really. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but
No, it has like, again, it's like the way I'm describing it's just like ear candy, but what that is like the jangly kind of pretty high end of the guitar mixed in with like the bells or glockenspiels that they have like mixed in there. Which what that is it just like it feels sparkly. I don't want to I don't want to undercut it with like kind of such a simpler word, but it feels like shimmery. It feels like shine. It feels like brightness. But it's something that it's the whole song is so satisfying to listen to. It's like there's so many foods that feel like eating like, you know, delicious kind of foods. Like when I'm listening to music, I feel like it's very similar to eating really good food. And with this, it feels like this song just feels like fucking dessert to me. It's just all the best parts of like a meal that are like the ones that I like I savor the most of like all these just like really delicate moments that come together that are just so it's flawless. It's just flawless kind of mixing.
Yeah, I think that this entire song, you know, from the songwriting aspect to the arrangement to the mix to the production, everything, I think is phenomenal. This was one of my favorite EPs of all of last year, and I just never got around to showing it on the podcast for whatever reason. But yeah, I've been listening to this almost nonstop since it came out.
Yeah, dude, Mid-Atlantic emo, solid, very fucking cool.
All right, where are we going next?
All right, next we're going to a little band called Big Head. This is my good friend Haley, who I actually grew up with. We're from the same hometown and ended up both coming to Brooklyn like at a later point in our lives. And I'll go into like the whole depth of like our background and stuff. But she started this band like in the last couple. She started writing music in the last couple years. Like she has not been doing this since high school. It's not something that just like, you know, she's been like really like honing her craft over decades. Like she just started getting into this. But the big thing though is that she's like maybe one of the deepest music appreciators I've ever met. And so she just started putting out this music, but she's got this band Big Head and put out this song and she's had a couple different singles, but this is the most recent one and it just fucking kills. But anyway, yeah, this is Big Head and it's fucking sick.
You're like tangos, harping music. I cry my eyes out every time. I hear autumn sweaters still in my closet, it's taking up space inside my mind. So I'm gonna sell it for money, I'll trade it for cash. I heard you looking, I'm nowhere
Super grungy. I like that a lot.
Yeah, man. It's just like the writing in this just fucking blows me away. So Haley and me were like really good. We grew up like, in the same town, but we became friends in high school.
Okay.
And we were part of this whole crew that would hang out, and we'd sometimes go to shows together. We'd like hang out, like watch movies together, but we had this whole like little like clique of people that we were hanging out with. And then me and Haley like didn't talk much. And then Haley ended up moving to Brooklyn around the same time that I moved to Brooklyn. We reconnected. And I remember Haley, not to like make all of these fucking, all these songs and all these people like surrounding Allapartus about Allapartus, but it was literally at the first Allapartus show that I played in years on the rooftop of my apartment building. Haley came, and Haley, after the show, I was hanging out there, and she's like, yeah, I like started writing some songs on this guitar that I got, and I think I want to like try putting something out, or maybe even like play a show or something. And I was like, I mean, Haley, like there's no one in the world who should be writing music more than you, because she's someone who's always had such a deep appreciation and love for music, and those always make the best writers, are people who just have deep love for music. And yeah, she put out a bunch of songs, and I was just fucking floored how she'd like started like writing songs and just pushed out these absolute fucking gems. There's so much to say about it, like as far as like the lyrics, but tell me what you think about it though. Tell me a little bit about like what your vibe is.
One of the first things that I was thinking is like, I feel like I overuse this, but like it feels like I've heard it forever, if that makes sense. Like it just feels so quintessentially like just 90s like grunge going into like, the early modern version of like power pop, kind of. Just like the song structure feels very classic, and I think also like I like these more mellow kind of like melancholy songs from time to time, because it just makes you feel something a little different than like a lot of music is either like very aggressive or very angry or very happy. And like the sort of like melancholy I think is interesting, because I feel like you don't get a lot of that anymore, which is neat.
I mean, it pulls, I mean, you can see a lot of the influences, and definitely like, yeah, like kind of like grunge stuff, and also like some more like modern stuff. Like I'm like Title Fight. Like I know Haley's a big Title Fight fan, and I feel like I hear a lot of that influence here. Or bands like Hum, more like 90s bands that had just like lots of heavy tone in it. But the idea of like the lyrics of this kind of like concept, at least what I pull from it, is this idea of like kind of like externalizing your interior world of like, what does moving on from like heartbreak or from like a relationship or something look like? And the idea of like someone having a bunch of someone's shit in your closet and deciding to like sell it, and kind of the concept of how you're externalizing your interior kind of process of like, I'm going to take this stuff, this heartbreak, and I'm just going to trade it for cold utilitarian cash, because that's what it means to me, and that's what the process is going to look like for moving on. That shit hits so hard, it's so heavy, and it's so simple. It's taking such common things and common processes that lots of people go through to communicate a really kind of complex idea of moving on. But that idea of like, kind of breaking down heartbreak is so incredible, and it's so simple. Again, this is a song that would have taken me 10 years to write, and she wrote in like a year or two. So it's like, I think it's exemplary of unbelievable talent on her part. And then also on the other side of like Parth, her guitarist, is just like one of the sickest guitarists of all time. He comes from like more of a math rock background, and his tone and the shredding that he does at the end with kind of the whole atmosphere swirling around it, it's just like, man, they're a match made in heaven. Like they go so hard with this track.
Yeah, it's super neat. I always have a hard time with stuff like this that's a lot more uses a lot more metaphor in the lyrics and things like that. Those are songs that I always grow to appreciate more than loving on the very first listen. And so I always kind of have a hard time with those types of songs on the podcast, because I'm like, I need to find this song and like read along with the lyrics, because I need to digest such a complex lyrical idea in one listen, which is difficult. But I do really like this a lot. It's definitely something that I'm going to return to and like analyze a bit more, I think.
This is like I hope Haley doesn't like hate me for making this comparison. But it almost reminds me of some songs or some movies where I feel like I constantly am turning it over It's like a lot of simple ideas, and then the more I listen to it and the more I turn it over, I feel like I keep on pulling more and more out of it, even though it seems so simple from the get-go, but I still keep on pulling more and more out of it. And a movie that it reminds me of, in the same way this song feels kind of hypnotic to me, it reminds me of the movie There Will Be Blood. Do you ever see the movie There Will Be Blood?
All right, yeah.
And there's something about the movie that it's very dark, it's very kind of like oppressive, but there's something about it that it's like, I can't watch it with my girlfriend. She's like, this is too depressing for me. I can watch it once, it's an incredible movie, but I never want to watch it again. I can watch it over and over again for some reason. And there's something about how it feels very hypnotic in its delivery and its editing and its production. And at the same time, the concepts that they put forth, even though there's like, there's like maybe 10 pages of dialogue in the film, the first 20 minutes of the film is silent. There's no talking in the first 20 minutes. I feel I can watch it over and over again because as many times as I listen to it, I come away with more stuff every time. And that's something that I feel like I really value. It's something I try really hard to do with Allapartus. But again, it's the fact that Haley was able to do this so effectively. It's just something I'm very impressed by, and I fucking love this song because of it.
Yeah. I always enjoy stuff that you can go back to and extrapolate meaning and ideas upon further listens. I think that that's awesome when you can really dig into something, sink your teeth in it. So my final song of the evening, I think you're really going to dig this one. It's I would call them experimental post-hardcore.
Yes.
This is the band from Virginia that I was thinking of. The band is called Pulses. They recently did a song with Coalesce, but they also put out an album called It Wasn't Supposed to Be Like This that is absolutely phenomenal. I can see in your face that you've heard some of this before, I think.
Dude, Run the Ghouls, it's Pulses, baby. Oh Dude, my God.
It's so much fun. So this is one of my favorites for people who aren't initiated. This is like the most fun experimental record you've ever heard. It's post-hardcore, but they pull on elements of like funk and rap and ska and like all of these different things.
Yes.
So the song that I'm gonna play is my personal favorite, which is Them Phones featuring Jer, also known as Ska Tune Network, on the horns, and this thing is incredible.
On the preview
I swear, these guys are like one of the most fun bands ever.
I so desperately want to see them live because
Dude,
all
it
of
would
their
be
songs
sick.
are such crazy bangers. Like, and it's all like so unwieldy. Oh my God, Pulses is so fun. I hadn't heard this song yet, and this song is killer.
Oh, you haven't heard this one? Oh man,
I
you have
this
to check out the
this
whole
one.
album. It's phenomenal.
I mean, it's like, you know, you hear my best friend is like a huge Gavin Dance fan, and you can hear
Okay.
kind of the Swan, kind of like the Swan genre of kind of like guitar playing, which is dope. But I've just never been a fan of like the singers of Gavin Dance. I love this singer. I love him so much.
Yes.
There's such like the heavy vocals have such concise delivery and texture. It's something that like it feels so good. It feels so like wily, but at the same time, there is so much precise control that is going into it. It doesn't feel like someone just screaming into a mic. It feels like there is such careful control and development of the style and the delivery. It almost like I have kind of like my red lines from I've got my Charlie from It's Always Sunny lines talking about Pepe Sylvia of my giant conspiracy where I can point to all these different things. But the another person who I feel like is very similar to this vocal delivery style is the lead singer of this band Gatherers, which I saw back in college. They're an amazing band. I believe some of the members do like production now in Jersey, but their singer has like a very similar vocal delivery that I love, that has so much texture and so much power in it, but doesn't feel like it's just a kid screaming into a microphone. It feels like a concise style. And on the other end of it, the guitarist from Gatherers ended up being another band called Soul Glow, which my friend from college, TJ, is the drummer of, and they also just have this crazy, really bombastic style live that is way heavier, like way more intense and way more in your face than this, but also at the same time shares a lot of the similar spirit. But dude, Pulses fucking rocks.
Hell yeah. I think one of the things that makes their vocalist stand out to me is that there's a lot more groove in the delivery than a lot of post-hardcore.
Yes.
A lot of post-hardcore is either long kind of like legato stuff, or it's like, you know, very like common rhythms and stuff like that. And this dude, like he's almost got the flow of like a rapper with his delivery, but it's still got that like aggression of it. And I think that it's such a neat cross section, the way that just this band in general deals with rhythm, because they have so many cool like quirky out of pocket rhythms that they incorporate into their stuff. Every time they have I don't know if one of them in the band is also a rapper or if they just feature a lot of people, but like anytime they do any of those sections, they also feel really cool, and like rhythmically they're very interesting. Also on I think it was Run the Ghouls, but also like just several of their songs, they have like extremely comedic lyrics. Like
yes.
if you listen to it, I think it's that one that mentions something about the fitness gram pacer test, which
yes.
And I'm just like, that's out of nowhere, but also hilarious.
It's just so like it takes. Post-hardcore is a genre that like takes itself sometimes so seriously. And me and my friends joke about this all the time, but the reality is like you go to these shows and it feels so good. It feels like such a fun thing. And the idea of like integrating a ska artist into this makes so much sense, because there's the sense of them having this music that is so like wild and is such a cacophony, but at the same time though that they're having so much fun with it, it almost feels like they're doing what everyone like what no one is thinking but everyone should be doing, which is just like having a blast with this kind of music. And that's why I so desperately want to go to a Pulses show, because I feel like you're listening to it, you've only barely tapped into it, and then you see it live, and I feel like that's just going to be a crowbar to the face with how much fucking fun it is. And yeah, man, it's like the bridge, it's just such deep pocket like funk bass that feels so good. And I just want to just
the way that it slows down there too, it's such a like, normally those types of transitions like bug me, but the way that they did it, there's like so much just swagger and like just the little like hi-hat thing that they're doing, and then it's just boom boom bam, like the slap bass is not something that you'd ever think you'd hear in like this type of music, and it's so cool.
And they kill it, man. They just totally kill it. Again, it's like it just goes to like this idea of style. They have so much style That's something
Yes.
that, I mean, you were talking earlier about the idea of like taking a fresh take. There's people who I feel like are kind of traditionalists where it's not the most novel, like, and like, you know, I have friends who are in bands that, again, like they're not doing anything that's totally like out of pocket, but it's very traditionalist, and I love them for that reason. But this is something that feels very fresh, and like there is a unique style to them. Like you said, they got a swagger. Like there's
Yeah.
an undeniable kind of like, yeah, man, it's a flavor, man. It's just they got fucking sauce in this music. God damn.
For real. Yeah, I can't believe that you haven't listened to the whole album yet. I looked at it on Spotify. I think I have like over half of the tracks hearted on Spotify. It's so funny. All right. So, what are we going to end with? What's our closer?
I'm honestly like, I'm like laughing at myself how much like, man, our fucking cycles must be synced up. How effortlessly this is going to dovetail into this last song.
I love it.
Like pulses, like what I'm about to play you is the primordial pulses from, oh God, what was it? So the last band I'm going to play is a band called Milstead. And I had to do this because this is maybe one of the most formative and important albums of my life. And it's from a band that no one knows about. But
Okay.
in my world, in my life, you look at New York as an entity, and you've got like Public Enemy, you've got Ramones, you've got Crime in Stereo, you've got someone like Lady Gaga, you know, you have someone like Interpol, you have all these huge bands, but right up there with the tops, with the absolute greats, like most influential is this band Milstead, and I'll go deeper into like what they mean and why they're so huge for me. But the reason why I wanted to like put them on blast for this podcast in particular is that they just like a week or two ago re-released their 2008 album Yeah, which has never been on Spotify before. And they've got
sick.
this song. They've got this song that is like they if you look them up on Instagram, their description is the Larry David of hardcore, which I think is hilarious.
I love that.
But you want to talk about style, you want to talk about swagger, man. I don't know anyone in the world who did it harder than Milstead. They never got the fucking flowers that they deserved. But this is my favorite track off of Yeah, and it's called The Fucking Bronze. Let's listen to it.
Let's go.
You're gonna go get a light. You're gonna have to get it right. If you're gonna go get a light, go get a light, go get a light. Now you're gonna have to get it right. Believe me when I say there's no better part of me. Shamefully, no truth behind my smile. Shorty, I know you can surely tell. All my limbs have been infected, and by morning amputated, so that nothing in this bed will ever resemble any part of any man you ever cared for. Trust me when I say there's no will behind my heart, and a fleeting memory, darling, has been tearing you to shards. We both focus on the exit, knowing there's no way that we'll escape this. All of the regret we've been expressing, even though it's only temporary. You know how to put me out of my misery. Go grab the gun, I'm locked in the basement, because I feel I'm gonna collapse. You know how ill I am. Go grab the gun, I'm locked in the basement. This is going to sound crazy. Your presence isn't needed, nor are your services. This cloud your eyes could be a break in your design, or maybe it's just lazy style. You gotta be a bigger man and defend this true story. Is what you said. Well, you are who you are, then I'll be who I am. Well, you make me feel strange. I have forgotten your name.
That is so all over the place in such a fun way.
Oh man.
Where to begin with something like that, man?
So this just came from an era of, again, like super early, man. This is back when like bands were making CDs and like handing them out at venues and stuff. And if you got your hands on a CD, you just listen to it. Like you just listen to it over and over again. And this was one of those bands. And I saw these guys, my friend, I was 13. I saw these guys at St. Paul's on the Hill Church. They played in the coffee hall of a church for a friend's birthday party. And these guys were like in their 20s, and they were playing like some kid's like birthday party. And they killed it. Funny. They came and they were just so down to do it, and they just ended up playing this amazing show. And I was like 13 at the time, and I was just dumbfounded by it. So I became obsessed with them. I became obsessed with this album. And like the ending of it, that really heavy thing, I mean, that's what most of their album is like. It's hardcore. It's straight up New York hardcore. But this is the band that, like, the first time I ever snuck into a show underage, it was to see these guys.
Oh, right.
I was 17, and I showed up to a bar in Williamsburg like 4 hours early before the bouncer came in. So that way I just sat in the back and pretended like I'd been there the whole time and didn't leave the bar for 5 hours. So that way they wouldn't card me. But this band is like just so pivotal to me. And I've always like in my head, in like my dream state of when I'm like, man, when Allapartus plays Madison Square Garden, what's the one cover I'm going to play to honor New York? It's going to be this fucking song, because the music has been so influential. But it's just like, yeah, it just has like style. It has swagger, and it's so fucking crazy. But I listened to this as a kid, and it just like, it unlocked a new neural network in my brain.
Oh,
but
yeah.
You tell me about it. What'd you think?
Well, I always think it's so funny when people have such a like formative memory, especially when it comes to artistic stuff like music and things like that. You've got this formative memory. You're like, oh yeah, my influences are this band that everybody's heard of, and this band that everybody's heard of, and this band that like 5 people know about. And it's always so funny to me, because it's like, I feel like everybody has that one band, especially like if you find them like through your parents or something like that. You're like, I thought that this band was huge, and it turns out they only put out like an album and an EP and were active for like 2.5 years.
I mean, it reminds me of that band. I can't remember what it is, but it's like the album's called like Death Metal or something. And it's a band that this person like found a CD of it in a Goodwill like 10 years ago and found it and loved it, and then tried looking it up and couldn't find the band anywhere. Couldn't find anything. So they posted it on like 4chan or something. And slowly over the course of a year, they started like finding all these members and finding out the story behind it. And the album is really good. It's this weird like Radiohead type like late 90s, early 2000s album. And these guys made one record and then like disappeared, and they all just like went off into the ether. But to me, I feel like this could be one of those albums where it's like, I'm looking for a CD of this. I've been listening to this album for like 10, 15 years, and I don't have the CD anymore. I have a copy of a CD that a friend of mine burned, and they lost their CD.
Oh, okay.
So it's like, that's another one of my like rant. Like if I could find someone who had this, I would give them $100 cash like that for them to get.
I was gonna say, I was like, I thought that you said that you had a CD of it.
Yes.
But yeah, a burned CD makes sense. It's also really interesting, like the bridge / breakdown part. The vocals almost sound like a jazz crooner over top of like you know this crazy ass instrumental. It literally sounds like if you were to like put like horns and stuff on it, that it would be like a Frank Sinatra thing or something like that. And then it's just over, you know, the craziest fucking instrumental you've ever heard. It's so bizarre in like a really neat way.
So Kelvin, their lead singer, you're like right on the money. He can fucking scream. Like they have songs where it's just him just howling into the mic the entire time. But one thing that was really inspiring to me as a kid is that I didn't listen to a lot of songs that had singers that had the same register as me. As I have like a really deep voice when I sing. And I was listening to like Anthony Green and like Seosin when I was younger. And I wanted to hit those high notes. And back in the day, that's how you knew you were a good singer. So you could hit really high notes. But I never could.
That was like the MySpace era where everybody had like the really high voices and shit. Yeah.
And I listened to this, and again, there's a part that's like really heavy and really cool, and he's just singing so softly, and he's just leaning into his low register, and I was like, this guy's singing low, and it sounds fucking incredible. And you're right, he's a total crooner, and he has these moments that are just totally smooth vocal, like, and they've got this one song off of this like little like B-sides album that they put on called Notions of Storm, or an Ocean of Storms, where they have just like, it's just soft like Rhodes piano and him singing, and it's incredible. And he could have been like a jazz like vocalist, but over this, and you have these like parts that are so chaotic and crazy and them just like jumping around kind of music. And then they have that ending where they have like that lead that's that kind of headbanger that's huge and very spacey and ethereal. And it's like, as much as it sounds like this whole kind of, again, this like cacophony kind of mess of like sound and styles, I look back and I'm like, this is where a lot of Allapartus came from, was this idea of like this high energy, but then this huge atmosphere all like mixed in together is so integral to me. But yeah, man, the style of it was something like unlike anything else I heard. And because it was a CD that like I had in my hands, I just listened to it 100 times and it left this huge impression. And maybe it's like, again, maybe it doesn't mean anything to anyone else, but for me, this feels like the whole world. And when they re-released it on Spotify, I didn't listen to anything else for a week. It's so good. It's so special. And it feels like such a special little corner of New York that feels like just the key to my upbringing. And I just fucking love this album. Fucking love that song.
I think it's really neat with CDs specifically, or I suppose tapes, but not so much anymore, which is that, and this is why I still love to buy CDs, outside of the fact that I like to own physical media because, you know, companies can just take shit away from you on a dime and then you just don't fucking own it anymore. Fucking hate that. But like,
oh my God.
On top of that is like, the more you listen to an album, the more you understand it, and the more you get it on a deeper level, and it imprints more on you. And I think that it's really neat because, like, you know, having a CD in your car, right? You listen to it when you're driving anywhere. It's just it's what turns on, and you're like, okay, cool. But you don't realize until you're talking to somebody else about it, and you're like, I know like every nook and cranny of this record because I've listened to it so many times. And I think that that's something that's like really unique to having that one tape or that one CD that's just in your car that, you know, you listen to for like 2 months or whatever, that like streaming you aux into your car or whatever and put on whatever you feel like. I don't know. It's something feels lost in there that is not a tangible thing, but it's something that, I don't know, just a part of the culture that feels like it's kind of missing. And I feel like that's also part of the reason why people don't have as much respect for albums as they used to.
Ryan. Number one, owning physical media is like the most important thing that anyone can do, because I couldn't agree more. The idea that like Spotify does not care about actually serving you good music. What they care about is serving you the music that you are most likely to like, that they want you to listen to. So there's always some sort of profit motive behind what these companies are pitching you. It's the same with Netflix. It's the same with like fucking video game companies. They're not giving you a choice of any music. They're giving you the choice of what they are interested and motivated to show you. And in that, there's always like this kind of whittling down and this watering down and this diluting of good art. And it's bad. It's bad for people. Now, I never want to be a Luddite and say that the way it was back when I was a kid was way better, because every fucking generation in all of history has always said that. There's a Carl Sagan in what is it? Science Like a Light in the Darkness. The Demon Haunted World is the name of the book. He talks about how the most ancient essay that exists in all of human history. I want to say it's not Mesopotamia. It's an more ancient civilization. But the most ancient essay is about how the current generation is entitled and not nearly as intelligent as the generation that came before it. It's the fucking same. It's Macedonia, I think is what
it's so
it was.
funny.
A Macedonian text. It's the same as it fucking ever was. Everyone's always going to say that their generation was better. That being said, I agree with you that, you know, there's the pros and cons to everything. And honestly, I will say that the dawn of streaming, the dawn of home studio recording is overwhelmingly has so many cons. There's so many kids who never would have an opportunity to A, make music, and B, listen to music that are going to listen to it now and make it now. And that's a wonderful thing. But you're absolutely right that the almost like desperate connection that you build to music and physical media when you go out, you save the fucking money, and you spent $15 on a CD. Back when $15 was a lot, back when you were a kid and making that was a big deal, that value transfers. And there is a devaluation that has happened to art and artistry, which is heartbreaking, because modern artists deserve to have that valuation of their work. But then there's the other end of like, also, we don't need to be producing mountains of plastic with CDs like we did back then. That's just going to plug up the oceans. But that being said,
I totally,
But that being said, again, like going back to Trent Reznor, because I'm just obsessed with Trent Reznor, he talks about a lot about how, the kind of the closeness that you build with physical media. And he talks about having like a subscription to a record, like, you know, service back when he was a kid in Pennsylvania, and how he'd get records that he necessarily wouldn't even like. But because he had the record, he paid for it, he would obsess over it and he would listen to it and he would pull value from it. So owning physical media, number one, is important because you can support artists. Number two, it's important because you can build up your own library, and corporations, you're not at their whim. You're not under their thumb, and you can actually curate your own interests, your own style, and your own taste.
Yes.
And number three, you can develop that relationship with the art that you wouldn't be able to in the same way in a digital world. And I think about all the time that it's just like, you're not going to discover music or to build a relationship with music looking stuff up on Spotify the same way that you did when you'd go into a record shop. And that was like, I was at the very end of record shops in New York City, even though they are experiencing like a renaissance, where like I'd go in and I'd hear a song on an album that Spotify never would have fed me through an algorithm because there'd be no indication that I would like it. And that discovery was beautiful. That connection I built was beautiful. And that made some of the most lasting impressions on me. So back to what you said initially, like there's pros and cons to everything that are changes. And it's just, the world doesn't end. You know, the music world isn't going to end. It's just going to change. And that being said, there are pros and cons, but I agree with you that the loss of physical media and the loss of that connection is a shame. It's a shame, and I miss it all the time.
And on top of, you're going into the aspect of like what people are trying to feed you as far as like what you're gonna consume when it comes to media and art and things like this.
Yeah.
But I there's also like such a big devaluation in art when it comes to like something gets put on a streaming service, gets no promotion, and then like I forget the name of it, but there were several things that were on like HBO Max that just got pulled. And they never got a physical release. They were put on HBO Max, and then HBO Max went, nobody's watching this, we're just going to take it down. And so the people who like it have no way to watch it anymore because it's not on streaming. It never got a physical copy made. And so now there's just this amazing project that nobody's going to experience until it maybe gets picked up by another streaming service. It's so weird because you also talked about like the back when you were first buying your first CDs and you finally saved up the $10-15 to buy it and all that. That's another thing that I kind of miss is like all of the liner notes and things like that.
Yes.
That was something that was such a big thing. Like I would buy a CD or a video game or whatever when I was a kid, and sitting in the back seat on the drive home, you're reading the manual to the video game, or you're reading the liner notes and like the lyrics of the song and stuff like that. And I think it's a shame that all of that has gone away. And I do understand, like you mentioned as well, the aspect of not needing to produce as much waste and use as much plastic and paper, because that's definitely a thing as well. But I think that there was, again, just a little bit of extra connection that you had to something when you were reading the liner notes, and there's just something about that feels like it's missing, and I miss it a lot.
To do what I always do, which is like bring it back to like promoting Allapartus one way or another, because I was trained as a salesman after college. It's in my blood at this point.
Yes.
But one of like the goals of kind of like I tried to like pinpoint like what are the kind of like key kind of like who are the types of people that I want interested in Allapartus? What's the kind of person who I think might be interested in Allapartus, and how can I make art that they might be interested in? What that really is that's me just trying to make art for myself. Like me as an appreciator of music, like what would I really, really love? And one aspect is the concept of physical media. So there's a lot of projects that I have and that I've done in the past where when I put out No Conviction is this whole like analysis of like the belief that people have in their own concepts of religion or the world or fate or what have you, the way that they view other people and their beliefs, and ultimately became me critiquing everyone's beliefs of like religion and stuff, and then me realizing that it was just a critique of myself and the way that I viewed the world, and that it ended up becoming kind of like a joke. But while I was doing it, I started writing out a pamphlet for a fake cult, and what was the philosophy of this cult, and how did they get their members, and what were their main goals. And I ended up creating this little pamphlet that I thought was interesting. I made all the art for it and everything, and then I printed it out and printed a bunch of copies, and then I wrote hidden messages in them, and then I had everyone who pre-saved send me their address, and I sent everyone a pamphlet.
Oh, that's so sick.
And the idea behind it is just like, how can you engage with someone in a physical way that's like low stakes, it's super like low threshold, it's easy to do. And if I was someone who just liked an artist, if they sent me a letter and it wasn't just a, hey, scan this QR link and pre-save my new single, but was actually like, here's something I'm giving to you that if you want to dig into the music more, there's more to find. There's more for you to dig into. And what I did with these pamphlets, which is like my cool like secret, was that inside the cult there were people who were trying to escape from it, and they ended up writing secret messages in invisible ink in the pamphlets.
Oh,
and if you put
that's so
UV light on it, you could see people like writing things like, "It's not safe here. Please help us." And yeah, I was like, what's something cool that I would find cool that could engage with physical media and attract more people who are interested in physical media? Because that's the kind of person I want to be working with. Those are people who I find will find the deepest kind of connections to our music and the music that I make, because that's how I connect to music. So the idea of having physical media and building stuff out like that, I think is super important.
You know who you would get a kick out of is an artist called Pacing. They are a kind of like alternative folky act, but then they've also got like a harsh noise song, and they kind of go all over the place. Anyway, they just recently put out an album, and they are gonna laugh so hard because the album title is so long, but I'm gonna say the whole thing. Real poetry is always about plants and birds and trees and the animals and milk and honey breathing in the pink, but real life is behind a screen. That is the name of the album. It's also the first like line of the first song on the album, which is called Bite Me. But they did a really funny thing where they did physical CD releases, and the album art on Spotify and all that is this collage type of art style. And so what they did is for every single CD, they took an old DVD case and made a custom collage for every single one that's like the same general aesthetic, but it's slightly different because they're all handmade. It's fucking awesome. It's so rad.
I wouldn't even listen to that band, and if someone pitched that to me, if they were like, "Oh, you just missed their set, but check out this merch that I would buy it." I'd buy it without
it's
fucking
so
blinking.
good.
That kind of care, and again, it's like this idea, like there's so many bands that do it. Like again, Trent Reznor, Nine Inch Nails does it. Another band that does it really well is Code Orange. They have such a rich world developed around their music, and that's something that I connect with very deeply. Because when I love an album, I want there to be more the more I listen to it. I don't want it to just be surface level, but the idea of someone who takes the time and energy and care and effort to make something like that feels like one-off, that feels special, that feels like I have a connection with this, that shit is so intangible, but it's something that takes a lot of extra effort, but it means the world, and it can make a difference for a release.
Totally.
My God, I'm so stoked to dig in. I'm looking at the artwork for this now, and it looks so fucking sick. Oh God, this shit inspires me to no end. This is like some of the stuff that I really dig into, of the stuff that makes me the most excited to create, is not just creating a song, creating like a vibe, creating like cool production, but making a world around the music. That's what's the most exciting to me. That shit is so fucking cool.
Creative people are going to find ways to be creative in new and unique ways, and I think that that's just the way that it goes. Our brains are wired differently, and ultimately, you see all of these things as new ways to just create something, and I think that that's such a beautiful thing.
Man, them artists, they're gonna art.
Yes. Man, this has been a great episode. I'm so glad to have had you on. Is there anything else that you want to specifically mention before we sign off on the first episode of season 4?
Ryan, I honestly, like, the only thing I can say is thank you. Like, this is such an incredible idea for a podcast. This is such a vital kind of podcast, because it's not just you engaging with your own creativity and making something cool. It's not just you collaborating with others with that creativity, but it's also you like putting on other people and building a community around, like, not just like finding fresh music and sending it out to other people, but supporting artists who are not huge. Like, that's such a vital thing. And ultimately, like, I made this whole joke TikTok recently that, the whole concept of the music industry is about monetization and how can you be as marketable as possible. And everything seems to be bent around marketing. And how can you appeal to marketers? How can you niche down? How can you like create a new subgenre? But the reality is, like, the most important thing, and always has been and always will be, is the idea of mutual collaboration in community. That's always been the thing that's driven the most success. It's always made the best art. And you've created a format that, on top of, I think, being something that could be enormously successful, is something that is so fucking generative and sustaining for art. So I wanted to say thank you. I think this is a brilliant idea. It's the reason why I follow followed you initially, and it's the reason why I was so stoked when you were down to do it together. But I think you've done something really good, something that's really worthwhile, and I hope that, I hope to be listening to season 20, because the shit is important. What you do really matters. And just, yeah, dude, fucking keep on doing it. This has been amazing, and thank you so much for having me. It's been such a pleasure talking.
I appreciate that so much, man. Yeah, it's the fact that I'm able to help artists that don't have the budget to be able to do all sorts of marketing and things like that. With this, you get an interview, you get a couple of TikToks or Instagram reels out of it, and all you have to do is sit down and shoot the shit with me for a couple hours, And I think I think it's so much fun. And every time I always walk away being like, that person was so cool. I'm so glad I got to talk to them.
Yeah, man. It's incredible. I couldn't be more stoked, and this has been such a pleasure. And again, there's nothing better. Music is the greatest thing in the world, and talking to people who love music is the best way you can spend your time other than listening to music. So being able to do both of those things in one sitting, I couldn't think of a better way to use, a random fucking Thursday night. You killed it. This has been the most effective use of my time that I've had all fucking week.
I love to hear that. This has been the Fresh Finds Podcast, the show about discovering new music with good people.
Here to heal, here to what is the true foundation of our essence, and is it true that we're all made in obsolescence? 'Cause I don't wanna live my life, I don't wanna live my life like all the good in me is just far out starlight, like flower petals in redshift, like far out starlight, like flower petals in redshift. And I won't stake my claim every time I break it. I break that frame, never take my name. Break that frame, never take my name. Break that frame, never take my name. I was sowing salt all inside my skin. Now nothing grows down where I live, and I said it was at fault when I took the hit. Now I know, now I know, now I know, now I know that I'm done with it. And when I go, yeah, go, yeah, go, yeah, go, we gotta run with it. There's more inside of me than just far out starlight, like flower petals in redshift, like far out starlight, like flower petals in redshift. And I won't stake my claim every time I break it. I break that frame, never take my name. Break that frame, never take my name. Break that frame, never take my name. Our voices align, and we just go through the motions, with your heart here with mine. I'm here to hear when I'm closing in. Our voices align, and we